Y'all, do y'all want to?
Thumbs up.
And then you give us a thumbs up. All right, welcome to Seneca Studios Gallery Night 2023. It's spring, and we're thrilled to host our featured artists for some demonstrations and our exhibition for the Fort Worth Art Dealers Association's Spring Gallery Night. I want to recognize the Texas Commission on the Arts for their support of Seneca Studios and our non-glass artist in residency program and our visiting artists program. I want to recognize the City of Fort Worth, R4 Foundation, and all of those out there who have donated. We really appreciate your support. And tonight is the culmination of that support for the spring gallery night. And we're thrilled to have Calder Kamin.
Yeah, that's right.
Calder Kamin as our featured artist. She's been with us for several months, experimenting in glass and realizing her concepts in a new material. And she's has been a great candidate and a really great artist in residence. So Calder, I want to introduce you and ask you a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
So who are you?
Well, I huge appreciation for Seneca. My name is Calder Kamin. Always been an artist. I'm from Austin, Texas. Came to Fort Worth a year ago to do a residency at American Landmark Apartments. I had a giant studio and an apartment on the north side of Fort Worth. I found out about Seneca driving down Magnolia and was like, I would love to learn a glass class. You were doing the glass blowing with the hearts. It was around February. And I was like, I want to do that. So I bought a Groupon and took the glass blowing and took a bead class and was totally obsessed. Most importantly, I really wanted to start making eyeballs for my animals. So I've always made animals ever since I was a little girl. But over maybe the last 10 years or so, I've been making animals completely out of garbage. And why? It's because I was making animals in clay and all kinds of other materials. But after I took up birding after undergrad, I watched birds in my neighborhood collect trash to build their nests. And I thought, what an incredible thing. We have this massive mess that we've created for the next generation by nature never wastes. That's totally a human issue, is making trash in the world. So I thought, why can't I transform trash to make the animals that I love? And then why couldn't I use glass to make eyes for my animals? But also too, thinking about glass, I have some future projects here. We made bioluminescent mushrooms, the medium being a part of the message, or why I choose my mediums. Like, I wanted to make a glass object that would really show glass and the beauty of glass. So thinking about bioluminescent mushrooms as a lighting source, we made lamps. I have a show coming up this summer with my gallery, Ivester Contemporary in Austin, and he asked all of his artists to make functional objects. So we played around with these canopic candy jars, and the team blew the glass barrels and bodies for my animals and the heads, and I will be applying tonight some ears and eyes. We'll also be making a mushroom, and I'll be making some eyes as well out of the soft glass from the hot shop, and we're going to have a lot of fun playing with the eyeballs too, and some sculptural things. And then what was also really important to me as well is to continue to be using post-consumer materials in all of my work. So this is we've just scratched the surface of this project in exploration. I want to continue to be working with post-consumer glass, and I learned so much about glass and all the different kinds of glass and what glass does and all its different temperaments. So what Jean and I had discovered together is that she had some experience with a student using lead crystal, so thrifted antique glass. You think of your candy dishes, that luminescent kind of chandelier glass, that can be smashed and remelted. So we have I've been playing a lot with mythological animals more recently in my work. And for this study, I played with the idea of the birth of my Pegasus. That's going to be an ongoing project. So in the crystal is the recycled glass, and then bullseye red glass underneath it too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. And so for you out there, Seneca Studios is a nonprofit. We do all kinds of programming. Tonight is a highlight of our arts and culture programming with a focus on community. Glass is about teamwork, you know. It's a transformative material, and the relationships that we build as a team can help us to realize these great things together. And we do it in glass blowing, flame worked glass, and kiln formed glass. And so in this program, and during Calder's residency, she worked in the glass blowing studio working with the soft soda lime glass. She worked in the flame working studio with some soft glass and some borosilicate glass, and she worked in the kiln forming studio with some soft glass and some very soft lead crystal glass, some repurposed materials. So it's been fascinating to watch you work and to watch you bring your ideas into this, because this material is so transformative. As you have realized, it's also fickle in ways and frustrating in other ways and fascinating, but it's a really wonderful medium, and I'm really thrilled to see the work that you have brought out of this residency.
Thank you. No, I appreciate all y'all's patience with me and playing with me. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, and that's there's a inherent nature to the material. As people sit on the bleachers tonight, we'll watch their eyes light up with this discovery and curiosity. And so, you know, working with artists who have not traditionally worked in glass, it's really magical, and we really enjoy doing that. So thank you. Yeah. All right, so the team, I want to recognize that it takes a team, and it takes all of our working together. Jean Fernandez is behind the gimbal tonight. Also, Amy Stevens will be with helping to produce the event. We have Heidi Childers, our operations director, who's helping to orchestrate, and Brandy, and Kanan, and Kevin, and there's a whole bunch of us. Christian. So we're all here together to help support this demonstration and realize these final forms as we kind of conclude and put the cherry on top of this residency. So thank you guys for tuning in. We will be manning the chat if you have questions. If you want to come down, we'll be here till 9. And there's plenty of room here. So
Calder's work is going to be up until the 1st of April.
Okay, so Calder's work will be here till the 1st of April, and then it sounds like it's going to be all over the place after that. So
lots of plans.
Lots of plans. So thank you guys for tuning in. Seneca does all kinds of public programming. We do outreach programming. If you like what you hear about us and you want to help us to continue, you can make a donation very easily online. Go to our website if you want to learn about any of the classes that we offer, and come by. Come check us out. There's 50 artists in this little room, and we do stuff all the time, 7 days a week. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Calder.
Thank you.
Thanks, Calder.
All right, Kanan, I'm handing you this mic. Not muted.
Okay, cool. So Brandy's
So if you guys have any questions, let me know. So we always start off with our clear glass. Our middle furnace actually holds about 385 pounds worth of clear glass. And so what we do after that is we decide what colors we want. And so in the scoops, we've actually have different crushed up different types of glass, and we'll be applying that. So you can see there's a small film on top of it that you can kind of see a little bit. All of our glass is gonna appear more orange while it's hot. Once it starts to cool, the colors are gonna come out. We won't be able to see the true colors until they fully cool down though. A lot of them are small variations on it. What color are we working with, Kevin?
We're doing the gold ruby.
All right. So gold ruby is going to be a nice transparent pink, almost like a ruby looking color. What gives us all of our different colors are going to be different metal oxides that we mix in it. So the giveaway for gold ruby is going to be gold in that case. That's actually a heavily used material in purples and pinks. Other colors such as like blues, greens, we'll use cobalt, iron. It depends on the type of colors, but we have many different type of metal oxides we'll use and actually mix with our glass. So we have our initial bubble. We now have a hollow piece of glass. I believe the first thing we're making is the lids for our jars. And so what we're going to do is we're going to allow this to cool down a little bit further. Once it is cold, it's going to be stable enough to get a second layer of glass on top. The amount of glass that we have right now would be perfect for an ornament, a real nice thin sphere. But since we're making a larger jar, we want to make sure that we have a good thickness so that way it's not fragile. So we'll get a second layer on top to get more glass. And in fact, most of the glass that you see really only has a small layer of color like we have now. Glass is really good at refracting light, and so most of the pieces that you see inside the gallery really only have a thin layer of color, and then about probably 80 to 90% of it is actually clear glass. So you can see Kevin has gone back into the furnace. He's going to bring that out and then cool down the pipe since it is now heated up. You can see we now have that second layer of glass, so we have a much larger piece that we can work with. The water's just cooling down the pipe currently.
I have tender hands.
So yeah, every time that we reheat or every time that we go into the furnace, the pipe's getting a little hotter gradually. So we just want to make sure it's nice and cool before we get that, start working with it. That way we can actually move it. What we're using now is we're using a cherry-based wood block. This block is in a basic shape that'll allow us to even out our next layer of glass. The idea is that if we apply just a little bit of pressure upwards, we're able to even out the next layer. So you can see now we have a nice circular pattern. We'll put a little air in there just to expand the bubble. And once we like that, we'll shape it up a little bit, reheat it, and then start actually forming the rest of our shape. Did you get a new blow hose?
I've had it for a while. I have to break it out for special events.
Fair enough. So Kevin has now attached a blow hose to the end of his pipe. The pipe is hollow throughout the entire piece, but the idea is that now he can blow through it if he wants. Before COVID, most of the time, we would be sharing our pipes and we would be blowing on each other's pipes. COVID taught us a lot of things.
I kissed so many people without knowing it.
Yeah. And so now most of us do use blowpipes on our own. What's nice though is that the steel kind of, since it's a cold metal, is self-sanitizing in a way. Most germs are going to die off the metal. But what's great is that now a lot of us use blow hoses, which means we can now blow ourselves, which allows us to add a little bit more control to our shape. So you can see Kevin's been shaping up the glass, blowing and expanding it just slightly, and he's also now using a pair tool called the jacks. These jacks are a multi-purpose tool, probably the most versatile in our studio, and allow us to not only create break points in our glass, where we'll eventually get it off the pipe, but also to shape the sides of pieces, as well as create openings.
How hard do you have to blow?
It's a very light pressure, and pressure is the key word there. So the question is, how hard do you have to blow? Ideally, you actually don't want to blow very hard at all. Whenever we blow, it's not really about pushing air out, more so about puffing with our cheeks and creating a nice pressure. The heat from the glass is causing the air inside of the pipe to expand, and as it does, it's going to push both back into Kevin's cheeks and into the glass. So if Kevin's maintaining pressure in his cheeks, the pressure is going to push out towards the glass. So the heat of the glass really does most of the work for us, especially when we get that initial starter bubble. It's all of the heat of the glass.
There was a tag that we all, okay, this got a small tag. And if you can find Cliff, get one of his really small sculpting tools, it works even better than the tags. You can actually see where you're mashing.
Has anyone taken a glass class with us before? Never? Awesome. One person? Awesome. It is, yes. It is very fun. If you guys ever do get the opportunity, I would highly recommend it. Calder actually got her start coming out here, taking a class. One day she was making hearts. She came in to make hearts as well as going to the Hot Shop studio, found a love for it, and then applied for the program, and now we're making a lot more stuff.
Oh, that'll work. Did we end up using that for any layer wax or anything like that? Do you remember? Did we use it with wax? I don't think we did end up using it, Christian.
Good? Cool.
So Calder just used the end of the jacks to be able to push into the glass a little bit more, creating some small divots. In a second, I believe we'll be adding more little bits of glass to create ears, and then also additional parts to create eye sockets.
Are we going round or pointy on the ears?
Let's start with round.
Got it. Whenever you're ready, good sir.
So we are going to be working on the ears next. So in the meantime, Kevin is going to do what we call flashing. The idea is that glass can never get below 900 degrees while we're working with it. If it starts to get below the 900-degree temperature mark, it starts to crack and break. And so what we want to do is make sure we maintain that heat. So Kevin is just going to go reheat for a couple seconds, bring it back, let it cool, reheat for a couple seconds, essentially babysitting the glass for the next couple minutes. In the meantime, you can see Christian has another pipe with some glass on the end, and he is also applying color. What we're going to do in a second is Christian is going to make sure the color lines up with our pink that we have here. And we're going to use that extra glass as a bit more to add an ear on top. And so in a second, after it's shaped up, we like the shape and everyone's on the same page, they'll take the extra bit of glass, attach it to our small head that we have now, and then they'll pull it off and cut it. So they're now going to take the extra piece of glass, attach it where they need to. Once it's attached, they're going to go ahead and cut. And then they're going to go ahead and reheat.
What's the purpose of that?
They're going to create an ear,
What's an ear?
just like an ear on an animal. So Calder likes to create a lot of different animals with the material. So this will be, this will be the lid in the shape of a head. And so you can see we flattened out that piece of glass to get a nice like rounded ear. And Calder signed off to say that it's pretty good. So we'll go ahead and get that next ear started. So yeah, if you guys are unfamiliar, Calder works primarily with creating animals. Originally got her BA in ceramics and art history. And so eventually transitioned into using reuse materials that we just find in everyday objects. A lot of different materials that were thrown out. And so she uses a lot of material that aren't typically seen as like recycled goods. and reincorporates them into her work. So we're creating like the canopic lid jar. Oh, she's heating up just a little bit of glass. This is going to be used to create little detailed areas. So she has a single rod of glass that she's just preheating. And she'll heat up just the tip so that way she can attach it to the larger piece in a second.
This glass is very soft and prone to exploding if it gets too hot too fast. So I'm just getting it a little bit light heat before I flash it with a flame.
So yeah, we have a little pilot light there just to heat up other stuff too. So we're using that to make sure it's preheated. You can see we get another little bit of glass, attach it, bring it up and cut it. And that'll be our second ear in a second. They're gonna reheat it real quick. And then when they come back, Calder's gonna use the tool in her hand to just smash it together. Essentially, it's 2 small plates and a plier. So we'll squeeze them together and create that flat ear.
Looks good. Yes.
So Calder's gone ahead and reheated some of this other glass that she's going to use in a second. We will refer to this as either a stringer or a rod of glass. Essentially, it's just a way for us to be able to draw glass on other pieces of glass. So you can see we take the torch, heat up just the tip, so that way that part is hot. And then in a second, she'll make either dollops for her eyes or draw with it. You can see it kind of gathers up on itself and creates a nice thick area. And then she'll bring the torch down and go ahead and just attach it to the glass. And then heat where it's attached, that way it'll kind of string off and break, and then melt back down into a little blob. So now we're going to do the same process again to get a second eye on here.
Yeah, here, that sounds good. Ready?
So once again, just getting a little dollop on there, heating it up, allowing it to tear off and break off, and then they'll flatten it down again. So we now have eyes and an ear. We have the general shape of the head now. So the idea for these is that they're similar to the ones in the gallery. We will be making a jar for them, similar to the jars on top of our metal table over there. And then we are going to open this up in a second so that way we can create an actual lid to this jar. What? Oh, never mind. So yeah, instead of opening it up, which we could do, we're instead just going to break it off, allow it to cool down, and then we'll actually cut away the glass and just smooth it out on a grinding wheel.
Great. We got one.
So I hinted to it a little bit earlier, but we have to get this off the pipe somehow. What we are going to do is we're going to allow this to cool down to where all the temperature's even. We have several different pieces of glass here, and so we need to make sure the thick part of the ears also cools at the same rate that, you know, the neck clears at or the general head clears at. So you can see Kevin's been reheating it, bringing it back to heat it and let it cool, allowing it all to equalize. After that, he is then going to stress out the area where he created that line. And once he stresses it out, that'll create enough of a weak point to where he can vibrate the pipe and tap it, and it'll break off. So he's gonna go ahead and cool it a little bit more with the jacks. He'll get his tweezers, get some water, and put the water on the line that he created earlier. That's creating weak areas that'll actually crack and stress the glass. and then he'll tap, and that vibration he sends breaks it along that line. So the other thing that we did talk about too is that the glass cannot go below 900 degrees, otherwise it starts to crack and break. That does mean that we have to allow it to cool down at a very specific rate. So we put our glass in our annealer, and then at the end of the day, we'll turn that annealer to a cycle that'll slowly cool it down over the course of 14 to 16 hours. If we allowed it to just naturally cool down, it would break itself apart, in some cases as violently. It just depends on how much thickness of glass there is, how thin areas are. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? Yes? The question was, does anybody burn themselves? In generally for our classes, most people do not. Us as glass blowers, since we do it all the time, yes.
I got a bunch under here too. It's from the equipment, it's never the glass. So a lot of times you can use the jacks not only as a defining line, but also as a cooling tool. So this strap or spring, you can cool and shape the material. If you come into the glass, grab it with the tongs, and then you want to cool it, a lot of times you'll pop it down onto your forearm and get lovely, lovely little lines. That's one reason why I wear Kevlar.
It's really hot. So when you go in
Yeah.
the door, it's shockingly hot, and that took a lot of time for me just to get used to the temperature and feel comfortable, right?
If you're taking a public class, the answer is most likely not. We are very careful with you guys. We make sure everyone's in the safest spot possible. It is only because we work with the material so often that we are more likely to get burned. We also get overconfident over time, and we're like, it's glass. I've worked with this forever. And then you're like, oh, that hurt. Everyone has a story if they've blown glass, though. If you've blown glass for a while, you have a story. Cool. Any other questions?
I did have one little, I was using the diamond saw. I grind everything and finish everything. Did not realize I gave myself a manicure and grinded all of my nails because you can't feel it when it's bumping up against you. Then I looked and I was like, I'm missing all my nails.
Was there any blood?
No.
So yeah.
Just a flesh wound.
The saws that we use in here to cut the glass aren't traditional saws like wood saws. Most wood saws have teeth that'll actually cut away the material. For us, it's actually a lot safer to grind the glass away. So our saws actually have a thin band of diamond grit that'll slowly chop away and grind away, similar to like sandpaper. Very much like Calder stated, it is a very fine grit, and sometimes it's hard to tell when you're touching that grit. There are plenty of times that I've been grinding and then my pinky just ends up flat on one side because I just didn't notice it was happening. Yeah, the other thing we learned during COVID is how many micro cuts we get in our hands when we work with glass a lot, especially when we cut it. Because as soon as we put hand sanitizer solution, you find out all the small cuts you have on your hand. So that was fun to get used to for the first week.
Protect your eyes.
Are we making another head?
Yes.
Excellent. So we are going to make a second one.
This will be the salmon, and then we'll do another gold ruby.
Perfect. So we are changing our color from the gold ruby, that is a nice transparent pink, to more of a salmon, which I believe is also still transparent, just a slightly different shade. Correct, yeah. So if you guys want an example of what the colors look like, the two right canopic jars are going to be our gold ruby. The one on the left from us is going to be the salmon. If you're watching from home, the single one on the right is the salmon. The two on the left are the gold ruby. Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for coming in. Oh, no worries. Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah. We're going to be here till 9, so. So for those of you guys who haven't been with us, we're Seneca Studios. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. Our focus is in public education and outreach. What you guys are seeing now is our hot shop studio. This is where we take glass from a middle furnace on the end of pipes and then sculpt and shape and blow it. We will later be doing some more torch working techniques. And then we'll also have on display some of our kiln working with castings. If you guys are interested in making your own glass, we do offer public classes in a variety of forms. We offer classes for the hot shop inside of here, as well as the kiln forming studio and the torch working studio.
I'm gonna take your camera for a little bit so I can charge it.
And then this set of ears will be pointy. The blowing part, you know, mine was the first time I came here to do the glass blowing class, I was just getting over a cold, so my blow was super good. So they benched me on that part, but what I can do is, and we will do with the mushrooms, is I do clean. So we transfer the object from one rod to another so that we can finish the bottom off. So I pull out of the first row and I can pull that part. And that part I do feel like started off rough, felt like I mastered it. But for me, this is like way too high stakes for making. Like I usually make things, you know, at a table.
So one of the other cool things about the glass is one of our most used tools is what we call our newspaper. It is just newspaper. We actually fold up about 7 layers of newspaper, allow it to soak in water, and then we'll burn it in so that way it creates a nice carbon layer. It's very nice because you can get very close to the glass. It's the closest you can get without actually physically touching it, and allows us to shape it up very easily. Another great thing about glass is that our tools really haven't changed that much over the last 400 years or so. The only things that have really changed is the actual torches we use. With the advancements in technology, we can get very nice, very accurate heating areas. But almost every other metal tool that you see on our bench, we've been using for centuries. Some of the first glass blowing techniques were actually done with almost molds exclusively, where you would blow into a shape to create a basic outline. And then after that, you would just allow it to cool. But you can see Kevin's currently using the newspaper to control the shape as well as cool specific edges. That way, whenever he blows, the heated spots of the glass are actually moving while the colder spots are staying still.
Oh, okay. Maybe a little taller, lighter. Yeah,
So Calder and Kevin are just discussing the size of the head that they want for this jar. They've decided they want it a little bit taller so that way it'll fit the form a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll stretch it, get a little bit taller. And that salmon one, I think, is probably the biggest of the three, so having a slightly larger difference probably makes sense.
So we're currently making another one of the lids for these canopic jars. So we heat up the glass, allow gravity to pull it off a little bit longer. And then Kevin's gonna go ahead and cool the base, that way it stays a little thicker. And then blow ever so lightly, so that way it just grows out slowly. So in a second, they're going to heat it up a little more. And then Calder will take the tips of the jacks and then stab in guide points for the ears and the eyes. Does anyone have any other questions at the moment? So you can see we'll take the jacks, go ahead and stab in where the ears will be, and then stab in where the eyes will be. Just to give it small guide points. You can see just then the glass was kind of moving away a little faster than Calder would have liked, so we're going to reheat it and stab in those eyes again. There we go. So we have a better guide point now. One of the difficulties with glass is that we're constantly either fighting with or using gravity. One of the reasons if you're watching, one of the reasons Kevin is turning the entire time is to make sure the glass stays in the center of the pipe. If we ever stop turning like Kevin just was in order for them to poke in the eyes, the gravity is going to cause glass to be pulled down. And so constant rotation of the pipe is important to make sure everything ends up on center, everything's even. So you can see even now while Kevin's just kind of not even touching it, letting it cool, he's still turning that pipe to make sure that it's moving. When we say we're turning the entire time, we do mean the entire time, by the way. If you take a class with us for one of the first times, that is the hardest thing to remember, is to keep turning. It's very common for us to grab tools or to have you guys grab a tool, forget to turn, and the glass piece just falls a little bit. That's also why we're there to help out with you guys, though, is that we're also helping you with turning, how to use the tools, and guiding you through the entire practice. Have we ever dropped glass? Yes. We won't see it on this one. We hopefully will not see it later either, but it does happen. There is a process we'll do later where we call punty the glass. The idea is that if we make a cup or a bowl or anything that we need to open up to create a hollow form, we cannot do that at this stage currently. If we wanted to make this a bowl, we would have to take another pipe with a piece of glass, attach it to the head of the jar, and then break it off one pipe so it sticks to another pipe. Then we can heat up the opening and then opening it up into a bowl. That is the most fragile part of the process because you're taking another piece of glass that is not super hot and attaching it. And if it doesn't attach well, it can break off and just fall on the floor. So it does happen sometimes. And we will see that a little bit later when we start making some of our other shapes. Specifically our mushrooms when we make those. So we've done the same process again. We get that extra bit of glass, attach it, and then now we're shaping up that ear. The last one we went for more of a rounded shape. This time we're going for more of a pointed shape. And so we're spending a little bit of extra time just to pull out the tip a little bit more to make it pointy.
We've got one more, we can go pointier.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's important in here is communication. You can see Christian, who's in our tie-dye Seneca shirt, Kevin in the gray, and then Calder over here. We're all communicating at all points in time. We want to make sure everyone's on the same page, everyone's getting glass when they're supposed to, everyone's bringing over things when they're supposed to. Glass blowing is a very team-oriented sport. It's very rare you see people who blow glass just by themselves. And so that's why we have multiple members here today kind of helping out. So once again, when we look at the colors here, we know they're going to be very different than what they will be at the very end. The colors here are the salmon that we've chosen. You can see the vase on the metal table, the one closest on the left side. That's what it'll look like at the end. So you can see over here we have more of a reddish hue just because it's hot metal glass and it appears a different color, versus it's more pink and salmon on the other cooled off piece. But we get some glass, cut it off, and then we'll reheat it, bring it back over, and then Calder will flatten that out. So we like where the ears are at now, so now we're going to take an extra little bit of glass. Calder is heating just the tip so that we can get a thick like glob of glass and then attach it for the eyes again. We are doing different colors than the other one, most likely because we have a different base color than the last one. But we'll heat up the glass, attach it, allow it to melt and pull away, and then flatten it out in a second. And so we like where the first one's at, so we'll reheat it, do the same process again, and then we'll allow everything to equalize in the heat and be able to put it away in our box again.
The red's a lot stiffer.
Yes. So Calder was just mentioning that the red is stiffer. We have different terms such as soft and stiff glass. That just lets us know how easily the glass moves at different temperatures. The reason we call red a stiff color is because the different metals that make it up have a high melting point, which means it takes a lot more heat to make it move. So it's much harder to move. Colors like blue, green, purple are what we call soft colors, and they move very easily. They have a very low melting point. So the red just takes a little bit longer to heat up, a little bit more time to sculpt, a little bit more difficult to work with in some cases.
Yes.
One last check.
And so now we're just checking on the final parts, making sure we like it, and we have that done. So to see some final examples of these in our gallery, we actually have a couple of Calder's pieces available to show. We have 2 sets of the canopic jars with a blue color scheme. And so once these cool down, we'll get them carved away, make sure they fit up, and size them up with our other jars that we have on display on the table. So now that we're done, you can see Christian has already gone ahead and suited up. He has put on Kevlar gloves and a shield protector. The idea is we have to get the glass away somehow. You don't want to grab this with your hands. Even though the glass is relatively cold, it's still at about 900, if not 1,000 degrees. That is our cold. That is the other reason that if you're ever in the glass studio, we'll tell you not to touch any of the glass that you see on the floor, because cold glass at 1,000 degrees looks like normal glass at 90 degrees. So once again, putting a little bit of water on that line that we created early on in the process, sending a small vibration through the pipe, and it breaks off. Now, because it does break, that does mean it is sharp. So that does have the ability to cut us. which is why it's so important to be able to grind that away once it does cool down. That way we don't end up with any sharp pieces. If you ever come in and make a paperweight, we'll talk about the same thing. We break it off on a line and we'll have to cold work it so that way it's a flat spot afterwards.
Yes, of course. We're going to switch it up. We're going to start making a mushroom.
Cool.
And I'll punty it.
So yeah. I believe, are we going to make a mushroom and then put eyes on it, or are we going to do just a color mushroom?
We'll do one mushroom without eyes, one mushroom with
Cool.
eyes.
Which one are we doing first?
Without.
Gotcha. Cool. So yeah, we'll be doing a mushroom. We'll be doing two different versions. If you guys have not seen some of the glass eyes that Calder has done, once again, those are in the gallery. But that's one of the things that Calder first started doing with us is actually when she took our class was making an eye in our torch working area. And then eventually got her own residency at another glass blowing area where she was working with borosilicate to make glass eyes. And then was able to come back here with our residency, work in all three of the studios, and make different glass eyes as well. So we'll be making one mushroom kind of as a warm-up and also just to get a really nice piece. And then we'll be creating a second mushroom that has a lot of the eyes that Calder has already previously made. Yes. Yeah, and if you guys don't know, our gallery features not only Calder's work, but over 50 different artists that we represent. They are different glass artists from around the country and the world. And so there's a good variety of art in there that you can check out, which is great. We also have plenty of brochures and information about different public classes we offer as well if you guys are ever interested in coming to take a class with us. We offer a large variety of different classes as well. Some that are more private 2-hour session where you can create smaller things and larger objects in the hot shop. We also have different workshops where you can come in for about 15 to 20 minutes just to get a taste of glass and bring home your own piece of work. And we offer classes in all three of our studios, our glass blowing studio, which we're in today, our torch working studio, which is beside us, and then our kiln forming studio that's in the back. Also, if anyone needs any water at any point in time, we have water in that corner. We also have drinks and refreshments and food a little bit over in here. Feel free to grab some as you guys are hanging out. Does anyone have any questions as well? Are we doing gold ruby?
Yes, sir.
Cool. So we are going to be making a mushroom with a very light layer of gold ruby color. Gold ruby. That's just the color that we're using. Yes, the one Christian's holding. What's great about our colors is we get a wide variety of colors. What becomes the challenge is how those colors interact with each other. So as we mentioned previously, some of them heat up very easily, some of them do not heat up very easily, so we have to keep that in mind when we're combining colors. Additionally, since they're all metals, they can undergo chemical reactions with each other. In many cases, colors like red, orange, and yellow don't like colors such as blue, purple, or green. They will actually react and form more brown-looking colors. So we have to consider all of that whenever we're applying our colors. The way we think about colors is not similar to a painter. You can't mix red and blue to get purple. Most of our colors are independent of each other, and you have to get the specific color and apply it to our glass. In fact, red and blue would probably make a brown color because the chemicals would react and create brown. Yeah, a beautiful one. But you can see a large different examples of colors that we have over here. We also have plenty of colors available if you come take a class, as well as plenty of colors over there. Colors are a rabbit hole of infinite possibilities. We also have different types. We can see that in the scoops, we're using more of like a powder-based color. This is a really nice fine powder that we can use. This is good for creating almost even layers and just creating a general color. We also have larger sizes. So you can see this one isn't quite a powder. It's more of like a frit is what we call it. We have different sizes of these ranging from very small particulate to very large particulates. And then additionally, we also have solid rods. We can actually cut these, heat them up, and then push them on top of glass. If you ever want a perfectly even layer of glass, we use rod and then actually layer it over it. Each of them serves a different function for us. As we talked about a little bit earlier, glass is usually about 80% clear, and then we have one small layer of color, and that's what makes it appear to have that color, because glass is really good at refracting light to make it look like the color's everywhere. That jar was made in a very similar fashion in how we're making this one, where we get the single layer of color and then add more clear on top of it, even though all of it does look like a ruby pink. What's great about the colors we're using today as well is they are transparent, so you can actually see the bubble inside of the glass. I don't know if up there you can see it as easily, but if Kevin takes away his newspaper, I bet you can see it. Oh, yeah, you can see it a little bit. You can see it a little bit. Kevin, look down. Oh, now you can see it. But you can see we can actually watch the bubble as we blow it and transform it and move it. That's not always the case though. A lot of the times our colors actually appear to be more opaque, which means we can't actually see the bubble inside of there. And that's where experience comes into play. Consistently making bubbles and consistently blowing allows us to know generally how it shapes up. We can also watch the glass and how it moves, and that'll let us know where the bubble is actually changing. So we've allowed it to cool again, and we're gonna get another layer. It is a lot of practice, yes. That's one of the hardest things, is consistency is really the key thing in glass. Once you see and once you do the motion of glass, it's easier to understand the concepts of it, but then you have to make yourself do those things. And that's where a lot of practice and timing comes into play. And so you can see we have a much larger amount of glass at this point. We're also changing the size of our block that we're using. So as we get larger and larger and larger, we have to use bigger tools, specifically our wooden blocks, which help us to even out the next layer of glass. You can see when Kevin was playing around with that, the glass looked a little uneven. Now when he comes off, he's applied the pressure, it looks a lot more even and symmetrical. And so this is important whenever we start off our next process, because if we don't have something that's symmetrical, it's hard to get an even piece that we can predict where it's going to go. So we add a little bit of air. Heat from the glass causes that air to expand, and as it does, it pushes on the glass, so that's what gives us the bigger shape there. And so now that we like the shape, we'll heat all the glass again. Are we going to marver this out? Are we going to marver it? Cool. So we're going to be using our metal table in a second. We call it a marver, M-A-R-V-E-R. It is similar to the word marve, which is Italian for marble. Back whenever they were blowing glass in Italy, they would use marble tables. Marble's very expensive. We use metal tables. But it acts in the same process. We are able to shape the glass on the sides. Additionally, the metal is pulling heat from the glass, which is cooling specific areas. And so whenever we blow, the glass is going to expand more where it's hot and less where it's cold. So you can see as we blow, the pipe is closer to where the bubble expands, but we still have a thicker part because he was shaping the bottom part to make it thick and cold. So he'll probably blow one more time after this, and you'll see the bottom will keep its thickness, while the top of it will thin out a little bit more. Once again, another benefit of us being able to see the bubble itself. If we couldn't see this at all, it would take the trained eye of everyone who's been working here for a little bit to be able to tell where it's blowing out specifically. Otherwise, it just all kind of looks like it's moving. So once again, we've gone back to our blow hose. The blow hose allows us to personally be able to blow. We talked about it a little bit beforehand, but before COVID, we were actually all sharing pipes. And then we found out that's probably not a good idea if there's a pandemic going on. So a lot of us got very familiar with using blowpipes to be able to blow our own pieces.
Scoot up. Please.
So Kevin's going to be using our newspaper layers in the same style as we use the metal marver.
Sorry.
So Kevin is just using 7 layers of folded newspaper that are wet. And he's just cooling and controlling the bottom of it while he's blowing to create our shape. All of the tools that you see in front of you on the bench are tools that have been being used for centuries. Many of our tools really haven't changed ever since the Italians started blowing glass. The only things that have really evolved with technology are our torches, because we're allowed to, create very specific heating areas. But the metal tools such as jacks, the shears, the tweezers, and everything in between really are very similar designs. So right now we're just getting the basic shape and the basic blowing technique done for our mushroom. We're elongating it currently by heating the glass and letting gravity pull it off. So you can see it's now elongated a couple inches at this point at least. So instead of having the more squat sphere that we had originally, we now have a much longer tube-like shape. Kevin's going to go ahead and create that break-off line that we do in the early process of this step. And from here on out, we're really going to focus heat away from the pipe. So the way that we shape the glass is we heat specific areas and we cool specific areas, and then we blow or push the glass. So now that we've established where the line is, we don't want to reheat that because we like the line. We don't want it to move. And so you'll notice Kevin's going to heat all of it for a second, and then he's going to really heat only the top part of the glass. That way, that's the only spot that's moving. So I can't see, but I assume that he's mostly out of the hole. Hey, there you go. You can see really only the tips in there. And so that's going to make sure all of the heat's really focused at the bottom of our glass. That way the rest of it doesn't move. And that'll make it a lot easier for us to shape the actual bell of the mushroom. And you can see a difference in the heat. We have a very bright orange near the tip, and we have more of a clearish pink on the backside that's more reminiscent of Calder glass. But you can see our shape's gotten much longer again. We'll once again take the newspaper, cooling the middle of it, and then blowing lightly just to get a little bit of air in there. Just getting the initial part of our shape completed. So he's pinching ever so lightly with his fingers just to create that small divot in the glass. So as he pinches, he blows, expanding the sides around it. Does anyone have any questions so far, by the way? It's a lot at once, too. There's a lot going on, especially there's many things that I'm not talking about as well. Yep. So we have different types of heat. The middle furnace that holds all the glass is at 2,100 degrees. That one's on 24/7. These holes on the side are at about 2,300 or 2,400 degrees. The working temperature for our glass is actually between about 1,200 to 2,000 degrees. We can work with this type of glass for about 20 to 30 seconds at a time, which is why we have to heat it, bring it back, heat it, bring it back. But you can see he's blown it out, controlled the shape at the top, and now we're getting closer to a mushroom dome at the top. Yeah, and that was a great question with the heat too. If you stick around and we start doing torch working later, you're gonna see that they have different types of heat they use. For us, that temperature of 1,200 to 2,000 degrees is our working temperature. For other glass, such as borosilicate, that uses closer to 3,000 degrees in order to heat up the glass. If you ever use plexiglass or anything else, that also uses very high temperatures. So depending on the type of glass and what it's made of, it has a varying amount of temperatures. Because they have all different temperatures too, that means we can't mix certain glass with ours. If we wanted to combine one of like the Topo Chico bottles that we have, we can't actually combine it with this glass because they have different melting points and they have different rates at which they cool. The Topo Chico bottle would actually cause our glass to break and explode before the Topo Chico bottle ever cracked. And so while we talk about that glass is an infinitely recyclable material, it's the same type of glass that is infinitely recyclable. So we can use this glass over and over and over again, but we can't combine, a beer bottle glass or a wine bottle glass, or you're like a plexiglass. We can't throw that into there and recycle it. Otherwise, it'll cause it to explode and not work properly. But you can see we've gotten our basic mushroom shape. Calder has now gotten an extra piece of glass on the end of a pipe, and Calder is going to marver across, creating our nice shape, cooling off the edges, but keeping the tip a little hot. In a second, we're going to attach the pipe to the mushroom, creating a small connection point that is just hot enough to attach, but not hot enough to fuse together. So you can see Calder's just trying to stay even with Kevin as they turn. Kevin is making sure the other pipe's centered with the mushroom tip. And they're now connected. It's a very small connection point and it's a weaker connection point. That way we can break it off a little bit more easily at the end. They're checking in with each other to make sure it's good. Kevin is once again going to put water on that stress line, tap, and you can see it stays on the other pipe now. So that is definitely the scariest part of the entire part of the process for sure. There was a little girl earlier that asked if we ever dropped any things, and that's the stage where we drop things. So we didn't drop things, so that's always good. What's fantastic about this is now we can heat the lip where it cracked and actually work on that side. So earlier I talked about how we make cups, bowls, platters, things of that nature. This is how we would do it. We would make that initial shape, punty it to the bottom to another pipe, and then break it off and create a new form. So even though that part of the glass was cold earlier at probably more 1,000 degrees or so, and that broke and cracked off, now we can heat it up, melt it back into that working temperature, and reshape it. So Kevin's focusing on that right now. In a second, Calder's going to be, are you going to be opening it up with the jacks? Perfect. So Calder's going to be using the jacks, which we made the line initially for. Calder will be using that to instead open up the actual base of the mushroom. Additionally, Christian, you can see, has a wooden paddle. He'll be using that to flatten the edge of the glass. So you can see now we have the nice orange temperature at the base of the mushroom, while the temperatures up top look colder. So Calder is going to go ahead and open that up. Christian is going to go ahead and make sure the bottom's flat. And Kevin is turning the pipe to make sure everything's on center. If you see a little bit of a flame on the jacks, the reason for that is we actually use beeswax. So you can see Calder just rubbed it across the beeswax. That allows us to act as a lubricant, so that way it glides across. If we don't have that, it actually starts to sound like brakes on an old car where it starts to squeal. I don't like that sound personally, so I like that we use the wax. Most of our other tools, though, we use water. The reason is water is a very good way to make sure we have a vapor layer for it to glide across, or to allow our tweezers to grab the glass. And we just put a small notch into it. These are going to be used for lighting in a future exhibition that Calder has. So the idea is the notch will be a spot where the glass can actually, or where we can send in lighting. So now we're just making sure the temperature's all equalized in heat. We want to make sure the base that was very hot a second ago gets to the same temperature as the top of the mushroom. Otherwise, when we put it away, the glass could start moving, the glass could stretch itself out and actually cause cracks because one spot's hotter than the other. So we just want to make sure all the temperature gets to around the 1,000-degree area. You can see we're closer now. Checking off of we're ready. And we're going to go ahead and tap, and we should get a nice release off that punny. And so now, because that spot, once again, since it's cold, it technically cracks and creates sharp areas, we're going to use the torch to melt those hard edges down into a soft area. That way it won't cut anyone. And we're going to put it away in our box. Woo! So our box is our annealing oven. It sits at about 920 degrees. Anytime glass gets below that temperature, it starts to crack and break. And so the idea is we hold it at 920 degrees, allowing it to kind of settle there. At the end of the day, when everything's put away, we'll turn that box off, and it'll slowly cool down over the course of 14 to 16 hours. If you guys are interested as well, Calder actually started off with glass by taking a class with us here at Seneca Studios. She actually came in to make a heart in the hot shop, and then was making eyes in the torch working area as well. So if you guys are also interested in learning how to make your own stuff, we do offer a lot of different public classes in the hot shop, in the torch working area, in our kiln forming studio in the back as well. Does anyone have any questions, by the way? Cool. Yes? So that's a great question. So the idea, the question was, how does the glass not deflate once you blow in? The idea with the glass is that whenever we blow, it'll slowly expand if we trap air. Once the air pressure is released, the glass holds its form. Now, if it does get too hot, the glass has a harder time holding structure, so it will start to collapse on itself a little bit. But if we're not melting it back down to like over 2,000 degrees, it should relatively stay in its structure. The other thing is usually when you watch a shape, we are holding a little bit of air in there.
We're a nonprofit dedicated to education, dedicated to community, and we use glass art and the creative process to help people to heal and to become interested in the visual arts, to become interested in science. A lot of our programming is focused around STEM concepts, STEAM concepts really, to include the arts. And we are a public access studio here for everyone. Seneca Studios was founded in 2010. We started offering program in early 2011, and we have over 30,000 people come and participate. The brand really illustrates community and bringing together the primary elements in community. We offer glass blowing opportunities, we offer flame working classes and workshops, and we also offer kiln forming classes. We've done programming for domestic abuse survivors, we've done programming for homeless kids and people who are looking to heal. We've used our process to help people to express themselves. One of our probably more powerful stories is about a young woman named Alexis who came in, and she had never worked with glass, and we did a kiln forming project, and she and her brother and several other students cast their ideas into thick pieces of glass, and she made a heart that helped her to express the loss of her father. Had a pacemaker. It was a real interesting piece, and it ended up going at auction to someone who had also lost their father, and it was a really powerful moment for all of us. She was struggling to express herself, and we helped her to find her voice and to make something that she could not only see how it could help her tell her story, but also to connect in the community and help someone else kind of heal through glass art. As Seneca Studio presents to foundations and to donors and receives support, oftentimes the support is specific to a project where we're bringing in kids that are connected with those foundations or with those donors, and that money goes specifically to offering this opportunity to people who wouldn't have it otherwise. The organization has a sustainability model where we generate revenue in many ways, and that revenue is what covers our overhead. and keeps the organization going. The support oftentimes is specific to a program, so that 100% of people's donations go towards offering programming to people. Our outreach and our culture of outreach really drives us to find funding outside of that so we can bring the community in and offer programs specifically to our community. Thank you. We are a determined group, and I pledge that any support offered will be used in endeavors in the spirit of community, with kindness and generosity, and with fearlessness.
Immediately introduce it to as much heat as possible. That will cause the glass to stress and crack. And so what we do is we slowly add more heat to it. Additionally, we do have glasses for you guys in here if you guys do want them. You can either wear sunglasses, or we have specific titanium glasses. Those will help if your eyes start to get stressed out a bit too much by the flame. While we're in the hot shop, we don't have to worry about the type of flame because most of it doesn't produce UV lights. The torch working flame will eventually start producing UV lights once it reaches a certain temperature. For example, once it does hit the 3,000 degree mark, that is when we have to wear the purple titanium glasses that some people are wearing. For now though, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. So you can see we've kind of attached the white to the clear area, and now we're going to allow it to melt down a little bit more. What's great about the shape of an eye is that it's a general marble, almost flat disc-like shape, which naturally will form if we are just heating up the glass. You can see it kind of balls up on its own. So in terms of shaping, we don't have to do an extreme amount of shaping. You can see Calder takes that and kind of lays it flat. And now that we have the basic outline of the white eyeball, we'll then take some other colors and start to add them. I believe we've picked up a red first. Slowly heating just the tip, while making sure the other one's still staying hot enough to where it won't break. So we want to make sure all the glass is fully fused together before we do anything else. Just making sure everything's nice and hot. So if we use words like stiffer and softer or how it moves, that's representing what different terms we use in the shop. So a stiff glass is usually one that has a higher melting point, which means it takes a lot more heat and it's much harder to work with, versus softer glass usually has a much lower melting point and it's a lot easier to heat and work with. And so when Calder's talking about different types of glass, she's using the term stiffer and softer The glass that we use in the hot shop, remember, has a melting point of about 2,100 degrees. The glass Calder was just talking about, borosilicate glass. That actually has a melting point of around 3,000 degrees. And the working temperature for that is between 3,000 and 4,000, which is significantly hotter, which means it's a lot harder to heat up and work with. While this glass moves very easily, so you have to be a little quicker to work with it. The same ideas apply with colors as well. Typically, our reds, oranges, and yellows are going to have higher melting points, which means they're a little harder to work with since you have to heat them up a little bit more. Our blues, greens, purples, those typically have much lower melting points, which makes them a lot easier to heat up and work with.
So my eye has its pupil and iris, and now I'm going to add the clear lens on top.
So we're going to encase those colors essentially to create a nice like glossy look to the eye. Are these more opaque colors?
Yeah, I just used red
Perfect.
because we're doing creepy eye.
So if you guys saw the hot shop stuff, those were all transparent colors that you could see through. These colors are going to be opaque, solid colors that you cannot see through. So the white acts as a nice canvas in the backing, while the red also is an opaque and a solid. So in order to give it that glassy look that a lot of different eyes have, we add some clear on top to make sure that it has that glassy look. So like we talked about in the hot shop, it's a lot of teamwork that goes into it. What's nice about torch working is that a lot of it can be done by itself. Nick, however, who you can see running back and forth a little bit more,
I forgot something.
Nick is grabbing some tools for Calder at the moment. If you guys are ever interested in taking a torch working class, Nick will most likely be the one to help instruct. So you can see Calder now is using the mold that we have here. It's a graphite mold. It's carved out into different sized, like almost spherical areas. And so we heat it up and just kind of round it about in there. That way we get a pretty even size the entire time. Especially if we're going to make multiples of these, we can get about the same size if we're heating it up and going into the same shape every time.
I'm pretty happy with how my eye looks. But it's the same thing that we did with the mushroom where we've transferred it from one rod to another. So I'm going to do that to get it off the mother rod and onto this temporary one.
So instead of grabbing a steel rod to putty it up, we just take another piece of glass, heat up the tip, and then attach it.
This part I had a lot of difficulty because it's so soft. Sometimes it's kind of wanting to stick a little too well. So what I was told is I wait for this to get a little bit clear. And then this is a gentle kiss. I marry the two glasses and they're connected. That's how I was taught. Give it a gentle kiss. I do not have the most delicate hand, I don't think.
One of the hardest,
Required here.
yeah, one of the hardest things with torch working is having both hands work simultaneously. In glass blowing, you have a little bit easier of a time because the pipe acts as your medium to turn, which means you really only have to turn with one hand. If you're doing torch working, you have to turn with both hands the entire time.
And a little excess when I'm finishing off my eye. Take off a little bit of your rod that I don't need. That's what I need with the cup. That's how you get rid of your excess stuff so you don't have fine glass on your workbench. And then I'm just waiting for the back of this rod to start to melt into the back of the eye.
So the idea is we don't want any like the excess amount of glass that we don't like. So you see Calder actually pulled it off, put it into the water to get rid of it. What we're doing now is we're mostly just cleaning up the back side so that way it looks like a complete area instead of having a weird angled sharp amount of glass there. We want to make sure it's all uniformly smooth area, especially since these are going to go on a clear mushroom top and you'll be able to see the back end of it. So you want to make sure all of the shape looks purposeful. What's nice about the torch working studio as well is it doesn't get quite as hot as the hot shop.
Well, this is a bigger flame than I usually work with.
That is a bigger flame than usual.
It's fine. I got it.
So yeah, the hot shop gets pretty hot.
But I'm now seeing the clear part from my last rod, the other rod, and then the back of the eye. They're just starting to melt into each other, so I have like a really nice rounded back. The first go that I had with the eyeballs, I was flattening my back and then distorting the eyeballs a little bit. So if I just have some patience and let the glass melt into it, I'll have a nice rounded back.
So yeah, since the flame's so controlled, it's a lot easier to get more precise heating areas. That's one of the reasons that you can see we have a torch very similarly to the one there that we can heat specific areas. If you were here to see the lids of the jars, Calder was using it to get just the tips of the eyes.
So I finished my eye. I'm flashing my graphite because I don't want it to hit something too cold when I knock it off. Moment of truth. Up. There.
So we're now going to break it off. And I believe we're going to heat it again because now that we've attached it to another pipe, it did get a little sharp. Or are we going to stick it away?
I'm gonna stick it in.
Ah, perfect. So we'll put it away. This small box is very similar to the other boxes. That is just holding at a specific temperature for us. It has a lot easier access because we will be using that a little bit later again. Awesome. How many eyes are we going to be making, do you think?
I can just hang out and make eyes until the crew's ready. So the next plan was to make a mushroom, and I'm going to apply eyeballs to the top of my mushroom.
Awesome.
So a collaboration with me and Seneca. So I think we're giving Kevin a breather. Or
Yes. Yeah, since the hot shop does get hot, everyone gets a little bit of breather in between. So if you guys are unfamiliar with Calder's work, Calder has a lot of different stuff in display in there at the moment. I believe we're also making mushrooms and stuff to go into a future exhibition as well. They'll be acting as a lighting source in the next exhibition that Calder does. Calder likes to work a lot with different repurposed material. The idea is we have a lot of different byproduct that us as humans just waste. One of the things that Calder is drawn towards, the idea is that nature never really wastes. Nature always finds a use for something. And so Calder's been creating different forms of animals ever since she was a young kid. She got her BA in ceramics and art history and was actually making a lot of different animal forms in ceramics, and then eventually started to moving to repurposed material to start creating different animals. So in display, we currently have a, is it a horse and a Pegasus? Thank you. The Pegasus is a big one. It uses a lot of different things. The hair is like different lid from like QT cups. We have the end of markers, different like foams and different other materials. All the different like beer cooler stuff were cut up and shaped to create different forms. And so what's great about glass is infinitely recyclable. You can actually keep repurposing glass over and over and over again.
yes, the mushroom lamps that I have in the gallery is all clear glass. It's all sandblasted. And while I've been here with Seneca, I've been working with the team to find a post-consumer glass that I could use easily in my studio. We found out that thrifted lead crystal, so like antique kind of chandelier, candy dish crystal glass, can be melted in the kiln. So I have some examples of our tests and some pieces that I made in the kiln.
So like we talked about a little bit earlier, it's harder to make glass, mix glass in this studio because in the hot shop, if the glass is not similar, they will actually break each other. And since we're starting with a molten form here, if we get a mixture, we have to throw out all of it because it'll all crack itself and break. But what's nice about going out and finding glass is that you can actually take, for example, the lead crystal glass that you found and actually create a mold and then heat the glass, and the glass will flow into the mold and create new forms. So you can take, like she was talking about, old different lead crystal like chandelier parts. You can take old window panes, melt everything together. There's a lot of different things you can do with different types. Yep.
Know which glass is what type of, like what it's made out of?
So the question was, how do you know how or what different types of glass are made out of? The biggest thing is that you don't really. We do stuff called stress testing. What we'll do is we'll take a little bit of glass from in here, a little bit of glass from the source that we're seeing if it's compatible with, and then we'll pull it into a very thin string of glass. If that glass begins to curl, that means that the glass is trying to pull away from the other one, which means it's incompatible. If it stays straight, we know it's compatible. For example, I had a commission work that I did where there was an old decanter that was made of soda lime glass, and they wanted to include the old broken pieces in new blown pieces for wine glasses. I couldn't tell them I could do that until I knew it was safe. So I had to do tests on that type of glass. Once I found out I did that, once I found out it worked, then I could take glass from the middle furnace, attach those extra bits like clear glass coloring, and then blow out pieces. But it's a lot of trial and error to figure it out. We buy all of our glass from different sources though, so we know it is compatible. Our glass actually appears to us in this sand form first in the hot shop. So it comes to us in this sand form. We melt it at 2100 degrees. It undergoes the chemical reaction to turn clear. And so for us, it's very easy to know that this is it. Additionally, in the kiln forming studio, a lot of the glass that's used is bullseye glass. We buy from the same company. We know it works. But what's nice about the kiln forming studio is you can take any glass from anywhere and kind of melt it down into the forms you want. You just can't really mix them. That's where it becomes a little bit more of an issue. So they took lead crystal glass and actually made some different Pegasus lying down in there in casted form. Yeah, great question. Does anyone else have any other questions at the moment? And Cliff, what are we doing on this side?
Just gathering up for Kevin. We're going to do another mushroom and clear, and she's going to add.
Perfect. So in the meantime, while Calder's finishing up another eye, Clifton is going to go ahead and start up another mushroom for us. This mushroom is going to be clear because we plan on adding the eyes to it, and we want the eyes to be the main focus of the mushroom. So one of the great things about glass blowing in general, or just glass studios that we offer here, is that whenever we do have an artist in resident who is working in different forms, we can actually combine all three studios together. And so what we're doing now is combining the glass shop, the blowing studio, and then we're combining the torch working studio since we're using the same type of glass. Additionally, tucked off away in a different kiln back in the corner, we have casted bird heads that are actually going up in temperature. We will be using those later in the night as well, and that type of glass is also going to be a little bit more compatible with us. So it's a rare instance where we're getting to combine the three different types of studios because we're using the same glass. Typically the three studios use different types of glass, but we can change the material to make everything kind of mesh into one.
Yeah, we'll later apply pieces that I made in the kiln, but we poured soft glass into the mold.
Yes.
So yeah, all three studios are being combined in here.
We also do, for the second Friday of almost every month, we have a visiting artist, or we do a different open studio night where you guys can come up and kind of watch us again and hang out. We had an artist, Eric Hansen, who came through who also does torch working and hot sculpted glass. He likes to do a lot of different work that will create paperweights with very intricate shapes on the inside. So he demoed a clown that he had actually created on the torch. And then after he created on the torch, he took glass from our hot shop and put it over that glass. And so that was another example of an artist using like two different studios to create a piece.
14th of next month, Dan Alexander.
The 14th of next month, Dan Alexander is going to be here, from what Clifton has just said. Dan Alexander. Did I say that? Okay. He's going to make huge things.
Big, powerful.
Does he do Marini and Kane to make the huge and then has big, thick, clear bits on it? That'll be a great one to see if you guys want to come out. We have a technique called Marini where we get patterned glass. You can see some examples in here with like the cubes and stuff. The idea is that we can take the pattern and apply it everywhere. So our visiting artist that we have next month is going to make giant pieces with that type of patterning. It will be great to see. Every time I see people who make big stuff, I'm always amazed too. I love working like really small stuff, so it's always cool to see people do stuff. I believe Calder's already punted that up to a different rod at this point, so now we're just heating up the back end. And then in a second, we'll break that off and then put it away in our annealing, the small annealing oven. In the meantime, Clifton is now on his third layer of clear glass. And he's going to start shaping it up again. Whenever we shape up our glass, we're always heating specific areas and cooling specific areas. That way when we blow, the shape moves where it's hot and the glass stays where it's cold. So you can see he was cooling the base, so when he blows, the tip or near the pipe moves, but the tip stays solid and it doesn't move as much. He'll blow a little bit again, it'll expand more where the pipe is, and the bottom stays thick. They had it last time where they were doing a sample. So if you guys don't know, they were making a sample of this a couple days ago to figure out if it was work. And if I'm correct, they got every single eye was the same type of glass until the very last piece of glass, if I'm correct. Calder, was the last glass eye that you put on the other week, was that a Boro one? So yeah. It was very interesting to see because every other glass piece was soft glass, which means it was compatible with this and it wouldn't break. The very last eye they chose to put on, it got mixed into the other soft glass pieces and it was actually a different type of glass. So where it attached, cracks exploded and formed around the entire mushroom. Do we still have that somewhere, Kevin?
Should be behind the sandblaster.
I'm going to go find it. So I found it, and I'm gonna let you guys guess where you think the one that broke it was. It's pretty obvious if you take a look. We kind of have one that just broke off. So this is why it's important to make sure all of our glass is compatible. If it's not compatible, we can have one little piece at the very end that just causes the entire thing to break.
Yeah, but look at it and you tell me if you can tell the difference.
I think it's a little easy to see. Oh, not the eye itself. It's just which one caused it to break.
Yeah, no. The eye itself, which one is soft and which one is
Yeah.
That takes a train out.
That one's harder to tell for sure. Cool. I'm going to leave this one over here too. So that's why it's important to make sure we have the same types of glass. Otherwise, if you mix in one that you didn't want to, it causes the entire thing to break. So we're doing the same process again where we're creating our elongated shape. That way we're going to get our blown mushroom form. After Clifton got the initial shape started, Kevin has now heated it and using gravity has elongated the shape. That is the squeaking I was talking about earlier if we don't get wax in our jacks. Luckily, a little wax seemed to have run down, so it's not. Nope, it's back. It is the worst sound in the studio by far. But what's nice is that we can just take those, rub a little bit of wax on the end. What's the first worst?
Sound of breaking glass.
Oh, breaking glass? Ah, no, it's fine. We can just make it again.
Will that hurt the glass or is it just
So the question is will the squealing hurt the glass? Technically, no. It can scar the glass in a way that it creates like marked lines because you have a metal essentially scraping across glass. But it's not going to like permanently scar it. It won't ruin the piece. But the beeswax is nice because one, it smells good. Two, it allows the metal to actually glide across the glass so that way we don't have to hear that horrible squealing. So Christian, after Kevin was using it, rubbed it on our corner of beeswax. That is the one tool that we use beeswax on. The reason is we don't want that tool to grab the glass. Every other metal tool in here, we want it in some way to grab the glass potentially. So we never put beeswax on any other tool. We also don't dunk the jacks in the water because the water will actually cause that wax to come off. And that wouldn't be good. You can see we have a much longer shape. Kevin is going to take our layers of newspaper, pinch together with his fingers, and then blow. And that'll create a divot, which will give us the basic form that we can start off creating our mushroom. You can see we have the stem and the bulb of the mushroom kind of separated out at this point, so we have a nice guiding of where we're going next. So the other thing we're going to start doing now is we're going to start heating specific areas of the glass. Kevin's probably focusing the heat really on the top part of the glass, away from the pipe. That way when he blows on the next one, it'll be able to shape. So you can see there's a much different hue of orange. He's elongated the shape, but the back near where the line is still a little colder. So we'll kind of cool it with the newspaper and then blow a little bit just to make sure we have our shape in there. And then kind of start blowing out and controlling the shape of the newspaper. Calder on the other side is now adding the pupil to the eye and just heating it up. And still cranking away at a couple eyes. We've also now opened up a door for us to be able to fit the mushroom into the hole. What's nice about the holes that we use in the hot shop is they have a 16-inch diameter, but we put doors on them to bring it down. As the doors open more and more, the heat is more radiant and more easily felt. So it's nice to have a closed door because you don't feel the heat. I'm sure that Kevin has stepped away now. Some of us in the front can feel the heat a little bit easier. A little bit. Sometimes, as an example, we'll open up all the doors and then you can feel it from all the way back here.
I see a propane tank per torch.
Yes.
No, just natural gas.
So yeah, the general question was just about the gases that we use. We have different propane gases, not only to feed the actual torches that we use. So the torch that Calder is using is currently attached to our oxygen and propane feed that we actually have back over here.
Oxygen, propane.
Yes, and so that's what will allow us to reach those high temperatures of 3,000 to 4,000 degrees. In the hot shop, we really only need to get to temperatures of like 2,400, which natural gas and air fed will get us to that temperature. But yes, we do have these torches here that also use the oxygen propane. We also do have a larger, what we call a fluffy torch, which we might use it at some point. It is this torch with the green handle that's not on currently. That one does use propane and air fed as well, and it gives a nice large flame that allows to heat a general area. But we can direct it in specific areas to allow some area to cool, some area to stay hot.
Practically, y'all don't have electric options.
What do you mean by electric options?
So, as they're trying to cut down the use of fossil fuels and get everybody on electric systems,
Yeah. Electric, yeah, so
Yes. I'll be right there.
yes. So the general question was just about the electric, the capability for us to use electric ovens in the future. We already do use electric with our annealers. All of those have coils inside of them, different elements, or an element coil, thank you, sorry. And that holds the temperatures. We can potentially use electric, but I think technology needs to advance a little bit further for us to be able to get to the higher temperatures and hold it. Gas is also the easiest for us to use at the moment, so I have no doubt in the future we'll be able to eventually bridge that gap and get to that point.
Metal reclaimers do that. There's a ton of them.
Yes. And what's nice about the electricity for this location is we are on the hospital district. So the power went out in the winter fiasco a couple of years ago. We didn't have to worry about that, fortunately.
Children in the hospital crew.
Yeah. And so it was fantastic for us because that's one of the biggest concerns with the hot shop is if you lose power, how do you keep the furnace from cooling or keep it staying hot? If the middle furnace cools down too fast, the amount of glass that's in there, if it cools improperly, will break and become very violent with the amount of glass that's in there. And so it's very important for us to make sure that our hot shop stays on 24/7. The side holes will turn off at different points, but the middle furnace we keep on. So what we did just now is we heated up the bulb of the mushroom and then we made some guiding marks with the jacks. That way we know where the eyes are gonna go. We are now gonna heat specific areas and then we will attach the eyes in those areas. So we're heating it up, grabbing an eye, and then we will attach. Perfect. And so we heat it up and you can see it sunk down a little bit just because the glass is thin and gravity pulls it. But that makes a nice little drip for the eye to kind of fill into. We can also blow that back out if we wanted to. So we're going to heat a specific area again. Christian, on the other hand, is keeping those eyes hot by giving it just a bit of heat and then bringing it over just when we need it. Perfect. Where's the remote for that? The remote for that.
The remote for that.
Shovel some more eyes.
So we're just adding more and more eyes. So those were the three that you just did, right?
Oh, those have been heating up.
Never mind. So those were heating up beforehand. Now we're going to take the three that Calder was just making beforehand and attach those.
That'll be the last thing we do is add the ones I just made.
Okay.
We're gonna try and put that on when we're fire polishing at
After
the
we,
very end.
yes.
Cool. And so we took those out. So you can see once again, we're kind of using the same torch that we were using over here to heat specific areas. And that's what's great about using this torch is that we can really make sure a certain spot's hot instead of heating a general area. So we were talking about how it sagged a little bit more than we wanted, but now we can just blow it out and kind of get the general shape back.
He's got a bumpy. That's right.
Here's a trick to the optometrist.
we're going to heat up another spot for the eye and then keep attaching. One of the things we talk about is repetition in the hot shop. A lot of people ask if we can make like cups, for example, over and over and over again, which we can. There's a couple different ways you can do it. You can either use a mold to where you make the same shape every single time. That way, whoever does it, it doesn't matter. The same shape as the mold, and it doesn't matter how they make it. The other way is by practicing over and over and over again the same shape and just doing it by hand for free. So this group has, together between Kevin, Christian, and Calder, they've all been working together, and they made this mushroom back over here as an example. So they know the process, which is why they're not like, you know, talking with each other about the steps a whole lot, going in depth. They're just checking in, going, let's heat, let's blow, let's move. Because they've already done this once or twice, they kind of know the process.
He's got two on the.
Oh, he has two? Then we can add
I just keep feeding him more. So you have options of what color you want.
Thanks.
Okay, we're gonna do one more on this, or we're punting it up.
Let's do one more and then we'll
Okay.
So we're going to add one more eye to this, and then we are going to punty it to a new pipe, and then open up the bottom so that way we can make it a light source later. So we'll heat the area, attach, and then we're good. So now because we heated those specific areas to a very high temperature, we need to make sure everything's a more even temperature now. So we're going to slowly cool it down to where it's all around 1,000, 1,200 degrees or so.
Yeah, what torch you want to press it in with that hot torch, and you want to circle around the eye.
So right now we're just trying to push back one of the eyes a little bit, touching it up, making sure everything looks a little bit more even.
Okay.
You guys are also more than welcome to come in and sit down if you want.
Okay, and then we got one eye that's punty.
Yeah, there's two of them. There's the last one and you got the last two you made are punty. You want to bring this punty?
Sure.
I mean, you might as well.
So for those of you just joining us, we're going to be making this into a mushroom. We now have the basic bulb of it done with the eyes on top, and then what we will do is grab a little bit of glass on another pipe, attach it to the tip of that mushroom, break it off so that way we can start working on the bottom. It'll be similar to this one over here. So we get a little bit of glass on that end of that pipe. Calder's then going to go ahead and shape it up, cooling the edges but keeping the tip a little hot. The goal is to create a connection point that is hot enough to touch and attach, but not so hot that it fuses together. When the glass starts to fuse together, it becomes strong and it's harder to break. So the idea is that we want to have a softer connection that's more easily broken apart. So Kevin's going to take it, go ahead and attach it to the base of the mushroom, or the top of the mushroom. It's going to recenter it. And then with the line that we created very early on in the process, our break-off point, he's going to eventually put water on that to create stress. And then once we break it off, it should stay attached to the other pipe. So a little bit of water on that line. He's going to go ahead and tap, and it breaks off to the other one. That is the part of the process where things are most likely to break, so you can definitely give a round of applause for things not breaking for sure. So what's great is that now that we've broken it off to another part, we can heat up just the base of that mushroom so we can begin to shape it and make sure we have a nice base for it to stand on. So instead of heating the top of the mushroom that was being worked on all this time, we can now focus the temperature where it's been coldest the longest.
We're gonna flash it once the punty's off, but then I'm gonna be on that side, and I need the two eyes that are here. So can somebody walk to me?
You want to both of them?
Or just one? Okay, I'll be on this side. That's why.
Does she want both of them? The ones
I
that
think
are on
she
the
just
punties?
wants one.
There's just two that are punty. Oh no!
Uh-oh.
So things broke off of the punty. We're now going to try to get it out.
What do you need, Kev?
Hot money.
So we're now quickly getting another piece of glass. Things have popped off. And so we're just trying to make sure that we can still work with it if we can. So the glass got very hot while it's in there, and it looks like it might be fused to the door. Yeah, so it got a little too hot there. So unfortunately, things don't always go to plan.
Do we want to save that cap?
Do you want to save the cap, Calder?
That's y'all's call. I have more eyes.
So unfortunately, things didn't go quite as planned. So we're now going to probably restart that process and keep going on. We were talking about how hot it gets if you open up the doors. As the doors are open, you guys on the bleachers can probably feel it's a little hotter now. So unfortunately, that's one of the things with glass. Glass is very temperamental. Sometimes it just likes to randomly pop up for a punty. But one of the things that you learn as a glass blower is when things break, you can just make it again.
It was a really good money.
Yeah.
I mean, it just like
Thanks, Kevin.
went.
So that means that the punny did exactly what it was supposed to. It broke off very easily when Kevin may have accidentally sent a small vibration somewhere. Which is fantastic, because that means Calder made a fantastic punty. It sucks, because that means our mushroom's on the floor.
I've dropped it off the punty once I tapped on that hole there to steady it, and just the slightest tap it dropped from that.
Just breathe the wrong way.
Yeah. So yeah,
More eyes.
exactly. So we get used to this type of thing happening just because it's glass. It breaks. And so we're just going to go ahead and get everything restarted, reshaped, and start going again. You can see Calder's already jumped on it to start making some eyes again, so we have some more for our next mushroom. Do we have any questions in the meantime? Yeah. So the question is how much of that glass is salvageable? Any of the clear parts we can recycle. So it's a great question because while glass is infinitely recyclable, here at our studio, we really can only recycle the clear glass. If you recycle all the colored glass, it'll be okay and work together, but eventually over time it's going to create a blue hue to our glass. And if we only have blue glass, we can only make blue things. I don't know about you guys, but I like other colors too. So all the clear glass we can recycle, and then someone else actually comes up and picks up a lot of the other glass color, and they'll make their own version of blue glass. So any of the clear parts in there we can recycle for sure. Also, any of the parts that we're not tearing off parts of the door. If there's like grime of dirt or door and stuff like that, that'll create bubbles inside of the glass. And bubbles in drinking vessels, for example, are usually not good. Bubbles will rise to the surface of the glass and pop eventually. And I don't know about you guys, but I like to drink out of a glass, not drink glass. So anything with like dirt or anything like that, we usually can't recycle either.
How often do y'all break pieces? How often do they-
So the question is how often do we break pieces? How often do we have to remake them? Ideally, not often. Just depends. For the most part, once you've been working with it for a while, it's more of a rare instance to happen. If you're working with it for the first year, pretty often. If you're by yourself and you're learning it on your own, or you're just in an educational system where you're learning how to blow glass, things are going to break pretty consistently. which is why I said we kind of mentally get used to it. It just happens. Once you've been blowing glass for several years, you're consistently making similar things over and over. You get a system which you're comfortable with, and it's rare that it breaks. So, depends. For our public classes, for example, I probably break things maybe once every couple months, I think. It just depends. It also changes based on like who's working with you and how you're working with it. So it's all the different variables that really change it. So one of the great things is that with the torch working area over here, Calder's going to go ahead and make some more eyes. We talked about it and touched about it a little bit earlier, but the glass has to be compatible in order for it to all melt together. We can't just take like soda bottle glass and combine it with our hot shot glass. The bottle glass will actually cause our hot shot glass to crack and break before the bottle glass ever does. This is an example of like why it's important to have the same type of glass. In this example of the mushroom, this is one that Calder had made earlier in the week. All of the eyes except for one were put on with the same type of glass, and one of them did not. You can probably tell which one was not the same type of glass based on how this mushroom top cracked. So the rest of these were soft glass, while the middle one was a borosilicate. This type of glass in here melts and stays melted at about 2100 degrees. Borosilicate melts at about 3000 degrees. That temperature difference lets us know that the glass is not compatible, which is why this one, as soon as it was attached and cooled just a bit, probably caused cracks everywhere. But that's why we're using soft glass over here, making sure all of our eyes are soft glass. You can see Clifton's gone ahead and started the clear part once again. We've started with the initial starter bubble. We'll get another layer of glass once that clear is cold. And we're going to get 3 layers of glass on this one. If we have 1 layer of glass, that's perfect for an ornament that you can come in and make. It's very nice and light. Our second layer of glass is good for about every single other item. Cups, pumpkins, cups, or bowls. But for our mushroom, since we want a much larger shape, we don't want it too thin, so we're going to get 3 layers of glass for that. That way it has enough structure for us to be able to sculpt, put eyes on, as well as a good base and solid standing everywhere else. You can see on our end over here, Calder has gone ahead and made the general shape of the eye with the pupils and everything, and is now going to use a layer of clear glass to essentially encase the color, giving it that nice glossy look that eyes should have. A lens, yes. For those of you guys who have just joined us, we're Seneca Studios. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. Calder here is our resident artist. She's been working with us for the last couple of months. Calder first started with glass actually at one of the classes that we offer. She took a class in the hot shop to make a heart, and then a class inside the torch working studio to make an eye. So if you guys are interested, you guys can also take those classes. But Calder primarily works in creating a lot of different animals. She's been creating animals since she was very young. She graduated with her bachelor's in ceramics and art history, and then eventually started working more and more with different materials, going eventually to repurposing other materials that humans are known to waste. One of the things that she really connects with is that nature never really wastes. If you think about it, a lot of the different birds, for example, she was watching birds one day and noticed that they were just using parts that humans throw out to create their nest, such as like random old sewn, twigs and everything else like that. I don't know. They use a lot of different materials to create their nest though, and so Calder was very interested in that and started repurposing other materials that humans typically waste, creating different animal forms. There's some examples inside of the gallery, such as the Pegasus that's on display. They use a lot of like old of the beer coolers that are like foam, as well as like different marker tips, different tops from cups. And so now we're using different types of glass, which are going to be used to create mushrooms with some eyes. Earlier we made some canopic jar lids, which are also an example in there that are being shown. And then later we'll be using some of our glass that was casted earlier this week and be putting those on different objects. Oh, gotcha. Does anyone else have any other questions, by the way? Cliff, do it. Cliff, do it.
I didn't see him do that.
So glass, because it is hot enough, fresh from the furnace, you can slap it, or as Cliff did, poke it. I wouldn't recommend it. But the idea is that if you are quick enough, the glass does not have enough time to fuse or like melt your skin. And the oils that your skin naturally produces, actually, if you go quick enough, just glide across. Cliff likes to poke it because he's been working with this so long, he's just like calloused hands at this point.
He has no fingertips.
Yeah, it's great. He has no fingertips. No one will ever find him. Yeah. We will use them sometimes for paperweights, for example, if we're making very nice like memorial paperweights that we do. We want to make sure they're perfectly symmetrical. Sometimes we'll wet our hand and we'll just glide our hand across the tip to make sure there's no bumps. Once again, if you're quick enough, it won't actually burn you, and you can feel the exterior of it to make sure there's no like weird areas. Once again, wouldn't recommend it unless you've been doing it for a little bit.
I'm throwing my eye. I heard it crack when I got up.
Oh. So once again, we had another crack. So the eye cracked at some point in time. It probably just got a little cold in one area. What colors were you using?
White, black, and green, but this green got really weird.
Okay.
And it was reliable last time I used it.
Interesting. So colors are one of those things that we always have to keep in mind. All the different colors that we use are made of different metal oxides. For example, greens typically are used with either iron or cobalts. Greens and blues are. We have purples and pinks, which are used with like golds. And then we have reds, which typically have like carmine. Our white uses like a lead oxide. And so we have to consider that sometimes the metals don't like to work with each other. So if we mix like a red color with a green color, sometimes it'll turn brown or black because the metals don't like each other. Additionally, sometimes the colors are just weird. So Calder was saying that the green one that she was using, this green specifically, was acting a bit strange while it was hot for some reason, which could have been the reason it cracked. So you can see Cliff on the other side is now using our Marver as our metal table that we use to shape and cool the glass. The idea is that we cool off specific sections so that way when we blow, it expands everywhere else. So we cool the base, that way it stays thick, blow a little bit, that way the actual part near the pipe blows out. Clifton also got very fancy and swung it very fast. That's because centrifugal force will allow that glass to pull off the end. It uses gravity and centrifugal force to essentially elongate the shape. You can see he's going to do the same thing here where he's going to allow gravity to pull that glass off the end. Because it is hot, it's all moving off the pipe. He's now using our newspaper. It is actually just 7 layers of newspaper folded together and wet. The natural fibers inside a newspaper create a nice carbon layer when burnt, which allows us to just kind of glide across of it. It is the closest our hands to get without touching it. Unless you're Cliff and you just want to poke it and touch it. But the same idea is still there. He is just cooling off those areas while Kevin was going to try to blow, but his pipe came off. Does anyone have any questions at this time, by the way? You can see Calder's kind of jumped back into making an eye again. I believe we have the white on there. Do we have any other colors on there right now? Cool. So we'll be adding some more colors in a second. In the meantime, Clifton's going to be creating that break-off point with the jacks. What's great about the tools that we use in the hot shop is really none of the tools have changed over the last several centuries. Ever since the Italians started blowing glass, they were using the same types of tools that we're using today. The only tools that really changed is our torches that we use. Because of advancements in technology, we can now get torches that reach thousands of degrees. But the metal tools are pretty much all about the same from what they once were.
I'm not going to have time, but you should eat it. Get it together. I'll definitely have a fry. Okay.
We have Domino's. Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
I'm complicated.
Oh, okay, that's fair. That food truck's really good if you haven't had it yet.
That's what we're going to do.
Hell yeah. It's the food truck.
Amy said it was really good.
Yeah. Yeah, if you guys don't know, we're talking about food. We're talking about that food truck over there, by the way, specifically. Fantastic. If you guys get the chance. I've seen a couple people go get it, so I just want to make sure.
Work, you get an appetite here.
Yes, that's one of the things is that unlike many other art forms, we're by the heat all the time, which means we have to stay hydrated. It is a bad day when a glassblower gets dehydrated because that means it's much harder to work. So you can see we're starting to get the shape of the basic form of the mushroom down. We use the newspaper to pinch a little bit, and we're going to slowly separate out the stem from the tip of the mushroom. Calder on this other side has now added a color for the eyeball, and is now heating and making sure it all fuses together. I'm just checking. We have several eyeballs over here. I was just checking.
We have enough.
There's at least like 10 in there, so. So Calder's got her color on the eyeball, now getting a little bit of black just to get a little tip of an iris. Like I mentioned just a second ago, if you guys are interested in taking classes with us, we offer public education classes for the hot shop, which is where Clifton's working right now. For our torch working area, which is typically over in the other room where we have snacks and refreshments, but you can make eyeballs similar to what Calder's doing right now. We also have our kiln forming studio in the back that also offers classes as well. You can see now that we got the basic shape of the stem, we're going to slowly blow out and create the top of the mushroom. First blowing it out into more of a sphere, and then we'll squish it back down to get more of that mushroom looking top. This is great. I don't think we've ever had a night where we have two people doing work at the same time, at least in a little while. You can see the shapes coming out a lot more now. Has anyone taken any classes with us before? A couple people. Yeah. It's a lot of fun the first time too. It's very overwhelming. But once you do it once, you're like, I got to do it a couple more times. That's how I started. I was a graphic design student, and now I'm doing this. You can see we're going to use gravity and just hold the air inside of there, which allows it to compress back a little bit more, creating that more bell-looking shape to the top of the mushroom. Then we're going to use the newspaper just to control the shape, also cooling up that top a little bit more, while Kevin's blowing ever so lightly. Mario and Yoshi would be proud.
Describing what shape I wanted, I was thinking Mario mushroom, toadstool.
Except with the eyes. So they now have the basic shape of the mushroom down. I think they're going to stick with that for a little bit. And then Calder's going to finish up this last eye, and they'll transition over and start actually creating the rest of the mushroom, similar to before. What do you mean?
Like you said, one was attached to different times, that's why it cracked.
Yes. So these were originally, these are all soft glass, so they were supposed to be attached. This one is a borosilicate. It got mixed in by mistake. So that's fine. Yeah, now we're making sure they're all soft glass. We're very, very certain about that. So Clifton's using the loudest tool in our shop. It is our fluffy torch. What's great about the fluffy torch is that we can heat specific areas while other areas cool. So they're making sure they're heating up that back line so that way it stays hot, while the very tip of the mushroom stays a little colder. So we have a couple different torches for different reasons. We have the yellow torch over there that we can heat very specific areas for smaller heat. We have the fluffy torch to heat general large areas. And then we have the really nice torch that's like 3,000 degrees.
Fluffy torch and her torch the same temperature?
No, so the question is the fluffy torch and the torch Calder using the same temperature? They are not. The fluffy torch sits probably at around 1900 degrees whenever it's on. Ish, sure, that sounds like a good number. Calder's torch is probably closer to about 2400 degrees right now. If we were to turn that torch up all the way, it would get upwards to 3,000 to 4,000 degrees. That type of flame we would use for borosilicate glass, which has a much higher melting point. Since we are using the same type of glass that we use in the hot shop, that one requires a much lower temperature, which is why that torch isn't as extreme right now. Yeah, any other questions from anyone? If you guys have them too, you can just shout them out at any point we're talking as well.
Oh, I was thinking once we get it.
So right now we're just kind of in a holding pattern. You can see Kevin's going back to the heat once in a while to heat the piece of the mushroom, bring it back, let it settle, heat it up again. We don't want it to get too hot. If it's too hot, it starts moving and we lose the shape. We don't want it to get too cold. If it gets too cold, it cracks and breaks. So we need to keep it between about 1,000 degrees to 1,200 degrees.
All right, Christian, you ready? What is your point of reference temperature if you're not using like some sort of meter?
So the question is what is the point of reference so that we know how hot the glass is, especially if we're not using like a thermometer or a gauge. The main way that we tell is just through experience. As a glass blower, if we've been doing it for a couple years, we can look at the glass and we notice three things. One, if the glass is clear, we know it's getting cold. If it has an orange hint or orange hue, we know it's a little hotter. Two, we look at how the glass is moving. The more the glass is moving, we know it's hot. Thirdly, it's just a timing thing. We can look towards the back where the pipe is and kind of tell about how hot it is, but mostly it's just timing. We have like an internal clock where we know we can work about 30 seconds and it'll be okay. So if we had color on this, we could also look at the color to see how it changes. That would also be another indicator of how hot things get.
He just pulls some eyes out of a box. Is that just like a little hot box?
Yep. So Christian off screen pulled off some eyes out of this red box over here. This red box is similar to what we use, it's called an annealer. It's holding all the eyes at about 900 to 1,000 degrees. Like we talked about, if it gets a little too cold, they start to crack. So since we know we're gonna use the eyes, we keep them at that temperature. That way they're nice and hot. So we can see Calder's now heated up a specific area with the torch. They're gonna go ahead and grab that eyeball, stick it onto the hot spot, and now they should be attached. Kevin's gonna go ahead and reheat that. Christian is gonna reheat the other eyeball that was left out, and then we'll do the same process again. So that's why it's important to make sure the eyeballs over here are at a high enough temperature, because one, if they get too cold, they crack and break. Two, if they start off cold, we have to spend a long time heating them up evenly. Otherwise, if they get too hot too fast, they're gonna wanna crack and break. So we've attached our second one. How many are you thinking you want to attach on this one?
I think 6 to 7.
All right, we're going for 6 or 7 eyes. So we're going to torch off a specific area again. Christian's going to go ahead and bring it over. And we'll go ahead and attach. Did we ever find the remote for the TV, by the way? I don't know where it is. So now we're torching again, grabbing another one. So we had a little bit of a slip there, but what's nice is that the glass was still hot enough to where you could push it around a little bit. What's nice with glass is that if you don't like something, you can always heat it, reshape it a little bit more. It gets a little bit more difficult when things are hollow. If you ever put a dent into the side of the cup, you can't ever get that dent out. There's always a history of it. So it's a little bit harder for us to do that now.
I know, I'm glad it's a nice night.
Yes. Tonight's a pretty nice night for sure. Whenever we had that thunderstorm that was going to come at some point in time the other day, it was awful. The humidity was terrible, and that is what causes it to be a very hot day in the hot shop. And we've gone ahead and attached again. Yeah, tonight's a great night for you guys to come out for sure. It's nice and cool. The humidity's not up too much.
Christian says pause. He's reloading. Uh-oh.
We're having some ice slippage over here. Woo.
I'm glad I made extras.
So the reason why we were getting that extra eye on there is one of them cracked. It most likely got stressed because it was too cold in one spot. And so it like cracked apart, so we got another one up on there.
Do you want the other top? So you're fine.
It cuts off where you guys are attaching stuff.
We should have a little bit better of an overhead camera now for you guys to see, by the way. For those of you just joining us, by the way, we have refreshments over in the other room as well as water back over here if you guys need any at any point in time. Calder's going to go ahead and heat up that one spot again, attaching one more eye. There we go.
Let's put one more on before we cut tea.
We got the 3 that you made.
Okay.
I'm gonna bring one of those over.
Sure. I'm just gonna need somebody to hold the punty while I knock it and flame it. Does that make sense, Clifton?
So Clifton, who has very little flame working experience, is going to go ahead and grab that. Just using small flames we can find to make sure that eyeball stays a little hot. And then they'll attach.
All right.
And we got a little extra glass with it that Cliff just broke off.
Good now.
That was what I was worried about. What we got?
Perfect.
Should I flash that one?
So we got it where we needed it to be.
Fire polish.
So because the other ones, we had heated them up and smoothed them all out, they were okay to just attach. That one, since it was attached to another piece of glass, when it breaks, it creates a sharp spot. There's a little glass left over, so they're gonna torch that eye specifically to melt back down that smooth spot, or make it smooth.
And then I'm gonna flash it again and I'll push that one in.
So now they're just talking about how they want the piece to go. You may notice they're not like talking step by step about instructions. They've done this now 3 or 4 times. So they're familiar with the process, so they're just checking in. Now that we're at a new spot we haven't gone to, they're now communicating a bit more. I liked your torch working technique. Well, Cliff doesn't feel heat, so his arm being in front of there, he was like, yeah, it's fine.
Cliff, can you punty this one?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that was the Boro one. So right now they're just checking on that mushroom with the eyes just to make sure everything's in place. If Calder likes where it's at, Cliff's gonna go ahead and get a punty and then create the connection point to flip it onto another pipe. We do have some more seats up over here if you guys want to try to squeeze in other spots.
Yeah, if anybody wants to get closer, we have a bench up in here.
So we're going to use that fluffy torch to make sure that we can get a nice heat just on the top of the mushroom, make sure everything's equal. Like I said, the fluffy torch is good for maintaining heat in specific areas. But yeah, a fluffy torch. It has a fluffy flame to it. It's nice. For those of you guys who just joined us, we are making a mushroom with some eyes on top. Calder over here in the overalls is our resident artist. Calder's been working with us for the past several months, working in each of the 3 different studios that we offer classes in. Calder actually first got her start in glass by taking a class in the hot shop and the torch working studio with us, and then completed a residency recently doing torch working, and is now completing her residency with us as well. So you can see we've attached it to another pipe. We break it off, and we'll throw it into there. So now we're going to heat it up to work on the bottom side. Since we just broke it off, it is a sharp spot, but the idea is that now we can heat it up and shape the bottom. This is a very similar style of what we would do to create cups, bowls, and platters, where we would create the general shape, punny it, and then heat it and open it. So that connection point is meant to be very weak, that way it breaks off easily. So if you guys were watching the last time, unfortunately we had a spot where we jumped a little bit, or it might have bounced and then it broke off. And so we got a nice long string of mushroomy gooness that did not quite end up being a mushroom. But as glass blowers, we're used to things breaking, so we jumped up immediately and just started getting ready for the next one. What's the success rate? Yeah. Generally, the success rate is very high. It's very rare that we break things. That was one of the rare instances where we broke something. So it happens, but the thing is that the first year you're learning how to make glass, everything breaks. Everything either looks really bad or everything breaks. And so at the end of the day, you're not happy with any of your pieces. Then you start working a little bit more and more, and you get more used to the process, you get more used to the glass. So mentally you're prepared for when things break, because you're like, oh, the first year I did this, it's fine, everything broke. But then you eventually get to the point where you're so used to the process, it's rare that things break. But you can see they've heated up that bottom side. They're now going to use those metal jacks to open it up a little bit more. Clifton is using a wood paddle to make sure the base stays flat. That way we have a nice even spot for it to sit on. If you see the fire on that metal tool, that is actually the beeswax melting off. We use beeswax as a lubricant on our jacks to make sure it doesn't grab the glass. That way it actually slides across. The jacks are one of the few tools that we do not want any type of grabbing to happen. We want it to actually glide with it. So you can see they're going to go ahead and start opening it up again. Clifton's going to control the base, creating a flat spot with the paddle. Opening it up wide enough so that way it has a nice area to sit, but not too wide to where it looks unnatural. So these are going to be used for light sources in an exhibition that Calder's going to be having later. And so all of these need to have a small notch on the bottom to get lighting into them. So Calder's going to go ahead and heat up a specific area. Once that spot is heated up a little bit more, he'll take the tweezers and then go ahead and open it up a little bit. That way we get a small notch. We'll take the paddle once again just to make sure it's all flat. And we're looking good. So the last thing that we're going to do is cover up the punny mark. So anytime that we break off pieces, they're always going to create sharp areas. So instead of smoothing this out and creating a weird spot, we're going to instead smooth the top and put an eyeball on it. That way it looks more natural. The other thing that we're going to do is equalize the temperature. Whenever we put the glass away in our box, we want it all to be at about 1,000 degrees or so. If one spot's very hot and one spot's cold, If we set it down, the glass can actually move because the glass is still hot and moving. The other thing it can do is cause stressed areas. If one spot's too hot and one's too cold, it'll stress the glass and cause a crack to happen from the cold to the hot. And so Kevin's making sure the temperature's even. Once it's even, then they're going to break off the piece. So because that punny is a fragile little area, it should be able to tap and break off quite easily. If not, we'll apply a little bit of a cold metal to it to make sure that it's stressed a little bit more, then tap. It's not quite breaking off as easily as we hoped, so we're going to reheat it real quick, get the shears to actually go in and cut a little bit to try to make it even colder, and then break it. You can see in the meantime, Clifton is holding an eye in the fire to make sure that it's okay and staying up. So now they're putting a little bit of water on the punny mark to make sure that it breaks off easily. You can see it broke off there. They're going to torch the top. Clifton is on the other end and he has the eye. So they're creating a hot spot where the eye is going to land. They're going to attach the eye. And they break it off. They're going to torch the top. Quick process here. And then they're going to come right behind where I'm at. All right, they're looking good.
Put it in the oven.
So our glass is going to sit at about 900 degrees. And this will be, so this will be sitting at 900 degrees, and we'll turn it off at the end of the night. It'll take about 14 to 16 hours to fully cool down. And that's good for 3 inches worth of glass. The more glass you have, the longer it takes. Yeah. Awesome. Well, great work, Calder. We have some more seats that opened up in the front. Are we still planning on doing our bird heads? Perfect. So we have seen stuff in the hot shop. We have seen stuff on the torch. Calder earlier this week made molds and actually got molten glass to be poured into it. And so we have bird heads that were over here in this kiln holding at about 940 degrees. We're going to take some glass on the end of the pipe, attach it to that to create a small connection point, and then we're going to work with those bird heads that were created earlier. Are there any questions at all, by the way? Yep.
Like natural gas and compressed oxygen, or
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, so the question was how these are flamed, essentially. The bigger torches, the one that Calder's about to light up, these are propane and oxygen fed. So these create very high temperatures that we can use, up to 3,000 to 4,000 degrees. The fluffy torch that was used earlier is just propane gas with an air-fed amount. And then the holes that we use are natural gas, and they are air-fed as well.
What do they run at?
What was that?
What are they running at?
The holes on the side run at about 2,300, 2,400 degrees. The middle furnace that holds all the glass runs at about 2,100 degrees. That one is on 24/7. That one holds about 385 pounds of clear glass. The ones on the side will turn off at the end of the night. But the middle one has to run the entire time we're using glass, essentially.
What exactly is the average glass melting point?
It depends on the type of the glass. So the question was, what's the average melting point? For soft glass in the hot shop, it's 2,100 degrees. For borosilicate glass, which is a much stiffer glass and adds more boron to the mix, it's about 3,060 degrees. 3,090 degrees is where sand begins to crystallize and become glass. 3,090. So glass has been around for quite a long time. If you don't know, glass is naturally found whenever lightning strikes on beaches and creates like tree branches of glass. That reacts at about 3,090 degrees at least. Ancient Egyptians also used glass in very small forms. We put ours away in a nice oven that cools down very specific temperatures. Egyptians would make small glass sculptures and then throw it in sand and be like, that's okay. And the sand just naturally cools it down. They were just like, it's okay.
Yeah, it's got the same temperature. Totally.
Yeah, Sand is a great insulator, so it just naturally holds the heat well, so glass would cool down naturally. They were also using a much easier mixture probably. Ours is very specific because it's very nice to work with. Theirs is probably more earthy, so it could take a lot more brunt of the stress. You can see Cliff has shaped up a little disc. He's going to go over, pick up a bird head out of this box. Now that's bird heads at 950 degrees, so he wants to very quickly bring it to the heat to make sure it's going to equalize in temperature. He doesn't want to shock it with the heat, so he puts it in for a quick second, brings it out, puts it in quick second, brings it out. He's then going to try to recenter to make sure it's on center. That way when we're turning, it's a little bit easier to work with. So tonight's a great example of how all three of the studios can collaborate together and work together. So these bird heads were made in the kiln forming studio. Casted forms were created, and so that's a great way we can use kiln forming in here. Torch working is very obviously being used at the moment to create different eyes and stuff, and then the hot shop has been the heart of everything and the base of everything. If you guys have not experienced a class before, we do offer classes in the hot shop. As I just talked about previously, Calder got her start in glass, taking a class with us inside of the hot shop and the studio, where she made eyeballs inside of the torch working area, and she made a blown heart in here. Additionally, we also have our kiln forming studio in the back, where we can make a lot of different functional ware, flatware, a lot of different objects. There are examples of both Calder's work and different work that you can make in our different studios inside of our gallery as well. If you guys have not seen the gallery, it's very cool, by the way. We represent over 50 different glass artists from around the world. There is a wide variety of different glass in there. My favorite is, there's a horned lizard in there by Grant Garmezi, that's really cool. There's also a wonderful wind star that Rob Cernas made that has like purple tentacle things. A couple eyeballs from Nick. And of course all of Calder's work front and center. So Cliff, once again, is just recentering.
These are glass rods, and they're the same kind of glass that's coming out of the hot shop, but it doesn't take too much heat for it to start popping and shattering. So I'm flashing it to get it up to temperature before it gets melted again.
What is the yellow stick?
I'm gonna make a pupil. Sorry, the iris. I'm making an eyeball right now.
Yeah. So yeah, the question was, what is Calder doing at the moment? Calder is currently making an eyeball. She is doing a torch working technique. So in the hot shop, our glass starts hot and it is liquid form, in molten form. Whenever we do torch working, the glass starts off cold. Whenever you're heating cold glass, if you try to heat all of it too quickly, the glass is more likely to crack and break because it doesn't go up in temperature evenly. So what we do is we heat just the tips of the glass slowly, so that way they kind of naturally grow up into the temperature we need it to. So you can see that's why she's like poking the flame a little bit. That way it just slowly heats and turns more and more orange. She's also just applying different colors to the eye to create not only the iris, but the pupil and then the general white everywhere.
So the stock rods are purchased around in size and color?
So it depends. So the question is like, what type of glass do we use in the torch working? Most of them, they are stock based, so we'll just buy them from different suppliers. Additionally, we can also create our own. So all the clear ones you see, we actually got from the furnace and we just pulled ourselves because we have the clear glass and it works with that. Yeah. We can also, since it's the same type of glass, we can actually apply color in here, then pull the rod if we wanted to. Just depends. All of the color though, we usually buy from suppliers because they have formulas to make specific colors. So we can have a sample list of like, oh, you want this color specifically? We can just order that color and we know it's gonna work. And each of the different studios has different glass suppliers because it's 3 different types of glass for the most part. In here, we have several different suppliers that we can buy from, and we know their catalog. In the back kiln forming studio, they use a lot of Bullseye glass, specifically is the company, so they'll get it from Bullseye. And then in torch working, they have very specific glass with samples as well. The reason it's important to buy from each supplier as well is each formula of glass changes. And so different glasses are not compatible. That's one of the reasons on this one. All of these eyes are okay because they're the same glass. This one caused the entire thing to crack because this is a different type of glass. And so when you try to combine two different types of glass, they actually break each other. And so that's why it's important for each of the studios to buy from specific glass vendors so they know their glass is going to work and it's compatible. What was that? Yeah, specific heat is a big issue. The cooling rate is the biggest issue though, yeah. We use a term called the coefficient of expansion, which is whenever something gets hot, how fast does it expand? Anytime anything gets hot, it usually starts to expand outwards as the molecules and atoms start to get further and further apart. For glass, the coefficient of expansion in here is at 90, 96. That's what it is. The one in the back for kiln for Bullseye is at 90. And then borosilicate's at something ridiculous. It's like 100 something. It's crazy. Pyrex glass, yeah. Yeah, so like borosilicate glass is what you get from like Pyrex glass, any of your Pyrex baking supplies. We cannot combine that at all with the glass in here. It will explode violently. And every type of glass has a certain amount of range they can actually combine with other materials. So for example, soft glass has about a 2 to 3 range with the COE. So you can get away with combining some cool things in glass. For example, like paper, you can do paper inclusions in glass. There's a lot of different artists who will actually trap a molecule, or they'll trap paper in glass. And if you trap it quick enough, it can't burn off the paper, so you can still see letters in the glass, or in the writing in the glass. There's a lot of cool things.
Very cool. Is it like oxygen?
What was that?
Is it like oxygen? Preserves the details?
Yeah, as soon as you trap it off, it burns off the oxygen, so the flame can't go anymore. So you just still get that newspaper look to it. It's super cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for coming in. Does anyone have any other questions, by the way? So Calder has finished up their eyeball. Oh, your punty stuck a little bit too much. So we're trying to force off the punny to break it. It broke off. It was a little violent, but it did break off. And because we're going to melt down that eye again later, we're not too worried about making sure that punny mark goes away. So I believe on the other side, Cliff is now making one of these jars that is on sample on the paddle up at the top. He has metal calipers that he's using to create about the approximate size. We've measured it up. So that's another way we can get more precise looking shapes is by using calipers to be able to size up what we're looking at. So Clifton is once again using the jacks to start creating a small break-off point. That'll be used later on in the process. You see now he's using that yellow torch. It creates a nice little heat, but it's not so extreme that it's going to completely melt away the glass. Just enough to make sure it's going to balancely heat it.
Online about our spring market, which is coming up on April 16th. They can make reservations to shop on our website or on our Facebook or our calendar.
12 to 6, right?
Timing is
So once again, just creating that nice area for it to break off on. Oh, sorry, we're not actually doing that. We're elongating the shape. It's hard to see from the other side. So we're using the jacks and actually pulling away and then tightening up that line a little bit more.
everything kind of starts out that way.
So we're going to be having a spring market, by the way. So that'll be April 16th. We're going to have a lot of different various items that are being sold. More spring things, such as like small snails you can put in gardens, flowers, some mushrooms as well, and also just general glass items from multiple of the different shops. You guys can either register online for a specific time or just come if you can. It'll be from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on April 16th. That is a Sunday. And we're going to have quite a large amount of different works available. So we're pulling out that shape a little bit more, defining the lines. So we are creating essentially the top to one of these vases. So you can see it's kind of got this bulbous shape and it's gone to step down. The step down is going to be what actually goes inside of the top of the jar. That way it has a stopped area. Once again, using the yellow torch to not heat it up to an extreme amount, but just enough to where it can start moving. If we were to use the larger torch to get a really high temperature heat on it, it might melt the glass too much and cause it to liquefy and move because we have such a small amount of glass. So the yellow torch is perfect for this case because it's just enough heat, but it's not like too direct of a heat. So once again, shaping that side up just a little bit more. Making sure it's nice and uniform. Measuring it up with the calipers. That way we know about how it's going to fit inside the vase. A question we get about like production, for example, and how we can make multiple of the same things over and over. One of the ways we can do that is by using molds to create the same thing. Or we can actually use our calipers to measure out specific sizes so we know at what stages the measurement should be. But you can see Cliff held it up next to it and we got the general shape of what we're going for. Once again, if you guys are unfamiliar with Calder, Calder's work focuses a lot on repurposing old materials to be able to create different animals. Calder's very fascinated by the idea that nature never really wastes. If you think about it, a lot of the different animals actually use a lot of human waste to create homes for themselves and different things they can use. So Calder really enjoys repurposing older materials that humans would call waste and then creating animal forms. For example, there's a Pegasus on the inside that's on a podium. That's a good example of that. And so Calder's been working for us with the last several months as our artist in resident. Calder's been working in all three of the different studios. And we're kind of seeing an example of all three with the different work that she's been doing tonight. So now we're just focusing on that shape, getting those final parts. Is the plan to keep it rounded, or what is the plan? Is the plan that this is a pedestal for those bird heads?
Put the bird head on here, and then this will be the lid.
Perfect. So earlier in the week, we were able to cast some bird heads out of this same type of glass. What we did is we created a plaster mold and then essentially poured glass into it and allowed it to cool down so we could make the same type of bird head shape over and over. Now what we're gonna do is take that glass from earlier, it's been heated up to about 950 or 1,000 degrees, pick it up on another pipe, and then attach it to this lid jar here that Cliff's been making. So this is a great example of how we can use casted glass and kiln forming and combine it with our hot shop as well. Does anyone have any questions, by the way? He's making the top of the jar over there. You're attached. So yeah, this will be the lid to that clear jar on the wood. So Cliff has been holding on, making sure that's nice and hot up there. He's now preheating his metal tool. He's then going to go ahead and grab a hold of the bird. And then they're going to break it off in a second, and he'll attach it to the glass. So it is now attached, and then they'll go ahead and make sure everything's nice and heated properly, so that way it's going to balance out. If one spot gets too cold while the other's too hot, it can stress it out and crack it. If both spots are too cold, it won't fully fuse together. So they're going to use the torch to focus the heat on that seam line. That way the glass fuses together, and it'll be one piece of glass. So you can see he heated up a little bit more. He's then going to push it back a little bit.
Are you just catching it?
Just to make sure it's fully fused together.
Yeah.
So now the head is fully fused into the top. And now they're going to equalize the temperature so they can break it off and then put it away in our box. Like we talked about with the annealer, we have a lot of pieces that live in there until the end of the night. It's easier for us to just make sure everything holds at the temperature, that way we can put as many pieces as we want, then cool them all down at the same rate. Yeah.
Everything looks good to me. Beautiful.
All right, so we got the sign off that we're looking pretty good. We're liking where it's at. Now we're just gonna make sure the temperature's all equal, and then we'll break it off. It is weird to say that we have to break the glass if you think about it, but every single time we make something, it always has to break, otherwise it'll never get off the pipe. So if you ever come to make anything in class with us, every item that we have will break off at some point, which is why in some cases it's gonna take a couple days for you to get it back, because we need to make sure all the sharp spots are smooth, such as what Clifton's doing now. We broke it off and it's cold, so that's a sharp area. So Cliff is gonna go ahead and heat it, smooth it out. That'll also make sure it's not a stress since that's the coldest spot. And we'll go ahead and put it away.
We're going to do the last lid.
Woo! Awesome job, guys.
Yay!
So I believe we're going to do one more lid. Is this going to be for the large gold ruby canopic jar? Yes. So similar to the one that we just did, we're going to create another topper for a jar. This one's going to be a little bit different. Instead of creating the entire shape, we are actually going to blow out the sphere to create a general top, and then we'll break it off and cut it off later to the correct size. Do you want me to move? Okay. So you can see our gold or our pink vase that we have. That is going to be the jar that we're going to make the top for. So Kevin's going to start off with a solid piece of glass. He's already put a little pink on there. He's going to blow. Whenever he blows, he's trapping air with thumb at the end of the pipe, and you can see that air expands and creates a bubble. So every type of piece of glass that we start off with is always solid at first, and so we have to create that hollow part in order to create blown objects. And it's really as simple as just trapping the air and letting the air expand and pressurize. So Kevin's gotten color on this glass. Kevin's also got the initial bubble. He's now going to allow it to cool. And once it is cooled, he is then going to get another layer of glass on there so that way he can make a larger shape. The amount of glass that he has right now would be perfect for like an ornament. So if you guys ever come in to make ornaments with us, we'll use this amount of glass. But to make a thing that's a little bit larger and a little thicker, that's more safe to be handled, we want to get a second layer of glass. Yeah, so the powder over there is actually different glass. Every single glass color that we use is actually made of a mixture of the original sand material as well as different metal oxides. The color we're using is called gold ruby. Gold is the primary element that is used inside of it to make it turn pink, along with a combination of some other stuff. So every color uses different metal oxides. Gold is most famously used in purple and pink. Iron and cobalt are used in things such as purple or blue and green. Carmine is used in like reds and some oranges. And then we have like leads and white. Silver is also used a lot. It just depends. Yeah. So now what's great is that since we have a transparent color, we can see the bubble itself. If we had opaque colors, it'd be harder to see the bubble, so we would just have to judge generally how the shape is moving to tell us how the bubble's being formed. But we can actually see it, so it makes it easier for us. So Kevin is just shaping, cooling, and blowing. He's going to create his cutoff point with the jacks. That'll be where we break it off, and then he'll blow. Once again, just making sure that that line is defined while also blowing out our shape so we have a nice, good spherical top. You can see the entire time we've been working in here in the hot shop, we've always had to shape it, then reheat it, then shape it. Glass is one of those unique types of materials where you have to keep it hot the entire time, but it doesn't stay hot forever. So we constantly have to go back to the heat to reheat it, come back and work with it. We have about a 20 to 30 second working time with any of the glass that we use.
The colors that we use.
So as soon as he comes out of the heat, the timer starts. He's got about 20 or 30 seconds to work with it. So the question is that the same for all types of glass? It depends. In the hot shop specifically, that is definitely the case. For torch working, it's similar. Excuse me. For torch working, you start off cold, but then once you heat it up, it has to stay hot the entire time. In terms of the time it has to be out. It changes on the type of glass. So, for example, this type of glass is what we refer to as spruce pine glass. it's the easiest glass to heat up by far. There are other types of glass that other studios use in a very similar setup. That one's called Boma glass. For Boma, the material that they use, they add a little bit more materials than what we have, and they get a very nice crystalline look to it. That is about 15 to 20 seconds of working time. Scientific glass, for example, uses quartz because it's a very strong, dense material. Quartz glass, you have about 10 seconds of working time. You also need a flame that reaches up to 3,000 to 4,000 degrees. So we're using the tips of the jacks to create guide points. The top is going to be where the ears are going to go, and then the ones on the sides are going to be where eyes go eventually. So it's just nice because the jacks will create 2 even spots if you tap it correct. You can see now that we're getting an extra piece of glass in this yellow rod. We're going to heat up just the tip slowly, and then once it starts getting to a higher temperature, we'll heat it really well and then melt it and get the eyes in. If we were to heat up that yellow rod all at once, it's more likely to crack and break. So it's better to just slowly hit it with the torch and kind of bounce it in and out. That way the temperature gradually rises. So Christian has gotten some more glass. This also has some of the gold ruby on it. They're going to go ahead and take the glass, attach it, bring it up, and then cut. This will create the extra little bit of glass that we need to create ears. And so for the most part this entire time tonight, we've been using the same type of shape and then adding glass from elsewhere. We can also just add glass from the furnace with other pipes. Calder's then going to go ahead and squish that together to create the ears. And we have a more pointed ear because we cut with shears at an angle. Is the camera good? Oh, okay, good. So we have one ear on there. Christian's getting more color on another pipe, and he's going to do that again. If you guys notice on Calder's glass, by the way, you can see one of the ends is orange and the rest is yellow. It's a great signifier of how glass changes whenever it's hot. The colors will change the more they're hot. If you have red, orange, and yellow, those are the most different colors when they're hot. Yellow looks more orange when it's hot. Orange looks brown when it's hot. Red can look very dark black or brown when it's hot. Once it cools back to room temperature, then it'll change back to the original colors you would have seen. It makes it a lot easier for us to tell whenever something's generally hot too, because even though the glass isn't moving, it's not at 2,000 degrees, we know it's hot because it's orange. What was that? Yes, and that's because the back end's cold. Only the very tip is hot. What? No, the glass is actually, well, the glass generally is a poor conductor of electricity or anything like that, but heat it'll actually take in quite well, especially if it's focused. But yeah, it's because the flame's hitting that specific spot. You can see that now that's being flashed even further, and so the orange is spreading more. But you can see on the other side, Calder's still working with that one end to make sure that the ears are okay. But now that we have that little tint of orange on that rod, we know it's hot enough at this point so that it won't get stressed. So we're gonna use the full flame and really heat it up. That way it balls back so we can get a nice bit of glass on there. So before it was just to bring the temperature up to like 1,000-ish degrees to make sure it was okay. Now we're gonna use that heat to make sure we can get a ball of glass that's molten and we can stick it and attach it. So we'll attach, heat it just a bit so it tears away. And then after we do that, we're gonna squish it back down. And then Kevin's gonna go ahead and reheat that glass real quick. Calder's going to go ahead and heat that glass again and do the same thing.
Did I get you? Sorry.
Very quick. Didn't actually burn me.
If you guys want to see finished examples of these jars with the lids, there's actually 2 blue ones inside of there as well.
Okay, I'll hand off the rod to you this time.
So once again, attaching, peeling, melting, and then pushing that back down. Perfect. And we are done with that. So now Kevin's just going to make sure the temperature's equal. Once it is equal, they'll break it off and put it away. Calder's also going to make sure everything's sized up correctly. Woo.
Okay, that looks good.
All right. So now that we have the temperature, or now that we have everything done, we're going to equalize the temperature. Once it is equalized, we'll break it off and put it away.
Pick up that other little bird head just to fire polish it and to get it out of the box.
Okay.
Just if anybody asks.
Sounds good.
It won't be on it long.
Okay. So they're going to heat it up one more time, bring it back, and then they'll break it off. So they'll chill off that line a little bit, cool it with some water. And then they'll tap and break it off. Awesome. We'll go ahead and put that one away. You want to take it?
Yeah, I'll take the mic. Here's both. Yeah, thanks guys. Thank you, Calder, very much for being our featured artist. Thank you guys for coming out. Thanks to FWADA for gallery night. And I want to thank the Texas Commission on the Arts for their support of Seneca Studios. I want to thank the R4 Foundation, Arts Fort Worth, the City of Fort Worth, and everybody out there who donates to help make what we do possible. If you're interested in what we do, go online, check out the website. You can come do it for yourself. Come take a class. But again, I want to thank Calder for her work with our Artist in Residency program. And thank you guys all for tuning in. On the 14th of, what's next month? The 16th? The spring market is on the 16th. But on the 14th, we have Dan Alexander in for our Open Studios night doing some demonstrations. So tune in for that one. And come see us, everybody. Thanks again. Y'all have a great, great evening.